again for the final in the Aimchess US Rapid with Magnus Carlsen looking sharp. He could now win his third tournament in the Meltwater Champions Chess Tour 2021. But for Vladislav Artemiev, this is only his third tournament, and he has now made it to his second final. If he's able to beat the world champion, that will be one of the biggest achievements in his career. So let's get ready for the fight, everyone. Welcome to the big final in the Aimchess US Rapid. One of these two players, Magnus Carlsen or Vladislav Artemiev, will be the winner of the Aimchess US Rapid, the last tournament before the big $300,000 tour final starting in about a month, you guys. And to guide us through the big final in this one, Women's Grandmaster and International Master Houska and Grandmaster David Howell. And well, David, what should we expect from a final between these two?
I think it's going to be a really close match. Magnus Carlsen, he does respect Artemiev a lot. He knows he has this fantastic skill, especially in the endgame, especially in these really strategic middle games, and therefore I think it's going to be quite cagey, and only one or two decisive games might decide this final.
All right, yeah, so Ivanka, what chances do you give 23-year-old Artemiev against the world champion?
Well, first of all, Magnus Carlsen always starts off as the favourite. He is the triple world champion, let's not forget that. But Artemiev does have this sublime positional sense, and this is his third time playing in the Meltwater Champions Chess Tour. And you know what they say? Third time lucky.
Exactly. Well, Magnus Carlsen, he tied the first semi-final match against Levon Aronian 2 days ago. So on the second semi-final day with Magnus and Levon, one of them had to win a game.
Difficult times for Levon Aronian. He has to fight hard now.
But look, Magnus, he's just merciless, pushing pawns forward, throwing them forward with abandon, attacking this bishop, and now if this bishop moves, you know what he's going to do, Ivanka? He's just going to push forward again. This knight is pinned, and if the rook ever drops off, remember, the queen is trapped. This is just
sensational
play.
We have a result. Levon Aronian resigns.
On the last day of the Aimchess US Rapid semi-finals, tension was the order of the day between Magnus Carlsen and Levon Aronian.
He's played it, he needs to win, he's brought his rook across, and he's inviting Magnus Carlsen to take this rook. We would see, okay, it's happened, Magnus calling Levon Aronian's bluff, and this wasn't actually one of the best moves according to the computer. Look at this now. White has two rooks for a black queen. Levon Aronian, he didn't even go for this.
No, he played very quickly. Bishop takes bishop.
What?
But you see what I mean about those fast decisions? Yeah.
You see a queen, you take a queen. No way to defend now. Aronian's fortress is being hammered down.
It's over, you guys. Magnus Carlsen is ready for another final.
The last game was so unbelievably shaky. Like, I just had one really bad moment when I played knight a3 early on. He made it very difficult for me, but yeah, fortunately I prevailed.
The match between Firouzja and Artemiev was so tight, it had to be decided by Armageddon.
Firouzja is panicking. That last move, it shows he's desperate to try and clarify the situation. That's a double attack. White's pawn is about to win a piece. Firouzja, he's losing on the board and the clock. There's no chance. Firouzja resigns.
Of course, I'm happy now because finally I won 2 big days for me, because every game with Magnus Carlsen, it's a good memory and a chance to play with one of the best players in history.
Yeah, it's going to be a big moment for Vladislav Artemiev in the final. He started out in the preliminaries knocking out Lenia Dominguez. For Magnus Carlsen, it was young Christoph Duda in the quarterfinals and a dominant performance by the world champion there to go through to the semifinals to face Levon Aronian, who knocked Magnus Carlsen out in the semifinals in the Gold Money Asian Rapid, but this time Magnus won the match against Levon Aronian, and Artemiev, after a tough fight with 18-year-old Alireza Firouzja, won the match in Armageddon and went through to the big final here. And there's supposed to be played also a match for third place, But Alireza Firouzja, he's sick, basically.
Yeah, it's unfortunate for Firouzja fans that we don't get to see that third place playoff, but we can't fault him. He's not feeling great. Also, yesterday playing for 5.5 hours when he is unwell. He needed a break and he has defaulted this match.
So that means Levon Aronian, he gets that third place. And it has a little bit to say for the overall tour standing. Let's take a look at the points, you guys, that will be given out in this tournament. So Artemiev, he won the preliminary, so he gained 10 points there. And then the winner of the tournament, either Magnus Carlsen or Artemiev, will gain 40 points. The runner-up, 25. And then third place, 15 points. Fourth place, 10 points. And we now know then that Levon Aronian will get that third place. And yeah, what are we seeing here on the tour standings, David?
We're seeing that Magnus Carlsen has established quite a decent lead ahead of Wesley So, but this is before he gets his added points, depending on his result for the final. So either 40 points or 25 points. And Magnus, he's going to be trying to extend his lead over Wesley So ahead of the tour finals.
But then, Jovanka, Vladislav Artemiev, he's in ninth on this one. This is with the points updated after preliminaries, and also for Firouzja and Aronian with the points they have gained for third and fourth place. But Artemiev, he's not going to be in ninth when this tournament finishes.
No, he certainly won't. And interestingly enough, this actually has great consequences for Hikaru Nakamura, because if Vladislav Artemiev finishes first, he will gain the 40 points and he will be ahead of Nakamura. So very important situation there.
Yeah. Maxim Vachier-Lagrave will be knocked out of top 8. Top 8 qualifies for the tour final. And Hikaru Nakamura could be knocked down to 7th or 8th place if Artemiev wins the tournament, but still safe to play the final, Hikaru Nakamura. All right, well, let's focus now on the big final in the Aimchess US Rapid. And how will the final be decided, David?
So the final will take place over 2 days, today and tomorrow. Each day comprises of 4 games. It's a match on each day, and these 4 games will be of the same time format as we've seen throughout the tour, 15 minutes per player. If after these 2 days the score is 1-1, if each player's won a match each, then it's down to tie breaks, and those will be decided by Blitz and Armageddon Chess in order to find a winner.
It's going to get dramatic, you guys. And a total then of 4 games today to decide a winner, or if it's tied, the first match here in the semifinals in the first game, starting in about 8 minutes. Vladislav Artemiev will have the white pieces. And after that game, we're going to be joined by Levon Aronian, who was supposed to play for third place. But since that is not happening, he's going to join us live. So we're looking forward to that. And we're also going to talk about how technology is changing chess today. And that is also the theme for the question of today.
Yes, and our quiz of the day has actually kindly been brought to us by Opera. And we are asking what new technology would help chess. Now, it's an amazing prize up for grabs. But in order to win today's question of the day, we actually have to enter. And you can only do so by tweeting us using 3 hashtags: ChessChamps, Opera, and Aimchess US Rapid. And the prize, it's unbelievable. It's a Chessable 1D4 course. It's 1 year Play Magnus Plus and 1 year membership of Chess24 Premium. Amazing prize. And the question, what new technology would help chess?
Exactly. All right, looking forward to your answers, everyone. And Magnus Carlsen, he's probably looking forward to the final now. We have to remember it's 2 months to go before his big World Championship match against Jan Nepomniachtchi. So we're always interested in hearing from Magnus how he feels he's playing chess, how he feels his form is. And this is what Magnus told us yesterday.
I think I played very well in the quarters. And yesterday I played okay. But today was not the level I need to be at to win a final. It's very nice to be in a final. So I don't, as I said before, I don't take it for granted. I just have to step it up tomorrow and the day after, and then I will have great chances.
Probably I think that it will be 2 big days for me, because every game with Magnus Carlsen important, and it's a good memory and chance to play with one of the best players in history.
It's going to be a good and a great moment for Vladislav Artemiev in the final against Magnus Carlsen, and especially if he wins it. Now, this is the head-to-head score between our two finalists in rapid chess, David. So, wow, they have not faced each other many times.
Yep, not too many games between these two in rapid chess in official tournaments. We know that Vladislav Artemiev, he's only played these 3 tour events, so he's only played Magnus a couple of times. And actually, I think they've played each other a lot online in friendly games, but either way, Artemiev, he knows that he has to spend today at least feeling out the world champion. He has to target the world champion's weaknesses.
Yeah, and Vladislav Artemiev, he's 23 years old. He is a Russian. He's a fantastic chess player. He has only played 3 events on the tour. We don't know him that well. So let's take a look at the stats for this fantastic chess player. Better in rapid chess than classical chess. Is that sort of what he's known for?
That was indeed his calling card. Yeah. In fact, he kind of burst into the scene very young age. He was known to be fantastic at blitz. And it was actually in 2019 where he made his big breakthrough. He won the Gibraltar Masters. He also won the European Individual Championship and also racked up a lot of points for the Russians in the World Team Chess Championship. They won gold because of him. And he's a formidable player, and now he's just getting his chance to shine on the world stage.
So we see these fantastic results from 2019, right before pandemic hit. Almost no over-the-board chess has been played. So what do you expect from Artemiev in these rating lists when over-the-board resumes?
His rating's simply going to shoot up. Yeah. There's no other way about it. We did see that was his big breakthrough year, and just before he got the opportunity to get invited to these super tournaments, these elite tournaments, the virus hit. So, yeah, once he does get these invitations, as we've seen on the tour, he's going to take that opportunity and he's going to show that he belongs there.
Yeah. And he's shown to be fantastic in the online rapid format. This is only his 3rd event, his 2nd final in the tour. And David, you're now going to introduce us a little bit to his style, what kind of player this is.
So the one thing that we've learnt to expect from Artemiev throughout the last 3 tournaments is he's headed towards the end games. That's where he loves to direct the game. That's where his strengths lie. And actually, I want to show one example from the prelim stage. Here, Artemiev had the black pieces. He's facing Wesley So. As we know, Wesley, he's been one of the best players throughout the tour. And he tricked Wesley So in an endgame. That's incredibly hard to do. Aimchess, the stats show that Wesley is one of the best endgame players, but here Artemiev defeated him and he set a trap in this position. It's actually white to play, and the best move for white probably is to step this pawn forward and give a check. But the other most natural move is what Wesley went for. He traded a pawn, but Artemiev, he's so sharp at tricks, 2 or 3 move tactics in endgames, and rather than the automatic pawn recapture when black has to suffer for a draw, he found a winning blow. That started with a series of checks. He gave a check with the black rook. He gave another check with the black rook once the king ran away, and after the king stepped forward, another check. And this was the key point. After this 3-4 move variation, he played rook takes pawn, and suddenly, at the end of this line, the white bishop is stuck because it has to defend its rook, and this caused Wesley So to lose a piece. There's no way to move this bishop away without giving up the rook, and after the king stepped forward, black simply captured the bishop and won a piece in the process. Artemiev, in endgames, he is so dangerous.
Wow. All right, you guys, it's getting close now. This player, Vladislav Artemiev, with his fantastic skills against Magnus Carlsen. Let's head into the play zone. Only 2 players left in the tournament. It's Magnus Carlsen sitting in Norway. It's going to be 5 o'clock for him when the game starts. Artemiev sitting in Russia at 6 o'clock for him. And Javanka, Magnus in the semifinals yesterday. 4 fairly fast games. He was finished quite early. Artemiev, 4 long games, and he had to go all the way to Armageddon. So how important has it been now for him to get a good night's sleep and to gain some energy?
Incredibly important, I have to say. I mean, these tournaments, they're very, very demanding on not only the mental system, but the physical system. You're talking about, first of all, 3 intense days of preliminaries, and then you have all the stresses and strains of the match situations. And like you say, yesterday was an incredibly emotional day from Artemiev. He had to win on demand, and again, he had to win in Armageddon, and I don't know whether he actually could manage to get a good night's sleep. There was a lot of adrenaline in the air there. But okay, today is a new day, and I would have hoped that he would have been able to rest a little bit.
Yeah, 6 hours for Artemiev yesterday. It was almost midnight when he finished the day. And we are waiting for him to arrive. Hopefully he has woken up today. Magnus Carlsen is ready for the final. And what do you expect to be Magnus's tactics here facing Artemiev, David?
Well, we know that Artemiev is great in the ending, so I think Magnus is going to try and shift the emphasis to other stages of the game. Of course, the opening is maybe the biggest weakness in Artemiev's armory right now in his arsenal. In the opening, because he's not as experienced as the others, because maybe he hasn't worked with as many coaches or with in these kind of big tournaments, he hasn't prepared for the real top dogs. His opening repertoire is occasionally a bit suspicious. And remember, Artemiev, he hasn't played these tournaments too much, so he plays in open tournaments where he needs to win, he needs to take risks. And that's why the top players, especially, they do try and target him in that stage.
Okay, that's interesting.
And another point is, yes, they haven't played too many games against each other, but they have played online matches twice, I'm thinking. The fact they played in a death match. And one noticeable thing about those challenges is that Magnus has emerged victorious, and he did so because he managed to complicate the game. He managed to make it crazy, and Artemiev could just not, he couldn't cope, basically.
Well, sounds like we will get some entertainment in this final. It has started. Artemiev made his move. What's happening with Magnus?
It's the English opening, and maybe Magnus just surprised by this decision from Artemiev. We saw that Magnus, just contemplating how to reply, he chooses one of the most flexible moves against the English opening, bringing the Black Knight out. And, OK, this game, especially when Artemiev's white, we expect a slower opening, a slower build-up, not too many trades initially, but he just wants to avoid those crazy types of scenarios that Ivanka was talking about. Magnus, meanwhile, as black, it's difficult to complicate things. Your opponent kind of chooses the terrain, chooses the type of style that you're going to be playing. And I suspect with Magnus, he would be happy to stay solid in this one and maybe try and go crazy a bit earlier on in the next game.
Also, very interesting opening choice from Artemiev. Yes, that is going to be his opening strategy, the one that David mentioned. But he's actually played this particular variation once before in this particular tournament. He played it against Jan-Christoph Duda.
Okay,
and if Magnus pushes his G-pawn one square further, I wonder whether Artemiev will continue with pushing his Queen's pawn. Oh, hang on a second. Let me. I want to say coordinates. I always want to say B3. I'm sorry.
So we could transpose to one of Adeban's favourite openings with that type of B3 idea, white pushing a pawn on that left flank.
3B3.
Yes. 3B3 rather than 1B3. That's what you're trying to say, Ivanka. Similar ideas, just different scenarios.
It's been a long tournament for us.
It's been a long season.
I know.
Yeah, this is... every day I'm thinking, oh, this is the last day of this and this is the last day of that, because this is the last final before the big tour final. That is a completely different format. So this is the last final that we will see in the 2021 tour. All right.
Yeah, and meanwhile, Magnus plays copycat. He's just gone for this symmetrical pawn structure, symmetrical system right now. It cost him a bit of time, and the viewers at home might be wondering, why did Magnus spend a minute and a half on move 2? But that's because black has so many choices, so many different setups, and you definitely have to choose a type of style here. Remember, Artemiev, he's not going to try and beat you from the opening. He's just trying to guide the middle game and end game into his type of position. So that's why Magnus, he's going to pause a few times in these early stages, just thinking, what is going to make Artemiev most uncomfortable? And, OK, white's knight coming out, black there, pushing a pawn, no more playing copycat. And it's up to Artemiev. There's a lot of choice in this position. White can push various pawns, and depending on what he does, Magnus will adapt and adjust. And, yeah, solid, flexible stuff from both sides so far.
Yeah, and in fact, both Artemiev and Magnus Carlsen have played this position with the white pieces. Artemiev, in an earlier game against Russian Grandmaster Dmitry Andreikin, actually chose to immediately sharpen the play by pushing his queen's pawn 2 squares, whereas Magnus, he took a little bit more of a solid approach. He instead developed his light squared bishop by pushing up the pawn on G2 1 square.
Yeah, so lots of different ideas here for white, and now we see Artemiev just taking a pause and not going for one of the moves you mentioned, Jovanka, playing a different approach, just pushing this pawn instead. And yeah, I think nearly every top player, nearly every grandmaster's played this type of position at some point in their career. But there are so many options on every turn that it's impossible to remember all your games, first of all, but also it's impossible to kind of guess all of your opponent's possible replies. That's why we see the few pauses here and there. It's not one of those types of positions where everything will get traded, really direct attacks. At the moment, it is very much about building up, and both sides have built up by occupying the centre with their pawns. And will we see a couple of trades? We could see Magnus maintain the tension with those pawns, just wait and let white spend the time taking pawns, or he can initiate that himself. And again, you see Magnus just staring off to the side there. That's not because he's trying to work things out. He's just trying to think, OK, I know that this is a move, I know that this is a move, and this is a move. I'm just going to compare and think, ooh, which one will Artemiev be least comfortable with?
Yeah, and he's also drawing from some experience because, indeed, Magnus Carlsen will have fond memories of playing this position with the white side because he beat Wesley So in the FTX Crypto Cup.
Yep. So, OK, Magnus, he knows what he likes white to do in these types of positions. Now he's going to be thinking what is most annoying for white in these types of positions because the shoe is on the other foot and he's black this time. I suspect a trade of some pawns in the centre. OK, no, he just waits. This is also very flexible. This pawn push might look really innocent and, it doesn't even do that much, but actually it controls some very important squares. For example, if we were to see a trade of pawns in the centre, white's bishop, white's light squared bishop might want to jump out later on and give some checks to the black king. That has been prevented. And it's time for Artemiev to decide. This is, you can tell the nerves maybe a little bit on both sides as well. They are having pretty long thinks for rapid chess, and it's only about to be move 6.
I know, and this is still very much in the realms of theory. This has been played hundreds and hundreds of times. And like David said, white has a choice. Artemiev can capture a pawn in the middle of the board. He can also be really cagey and actually say, hey, Magnus, you know that strange move you played with the A-pawn? I can do the same. And again, control some squares. He can also decide to, instead of capturing towards the centre, he can capture away from the centre and present black with some choice. Also, he can just develop a bishop and get his king castled to safety.
So at least
Artemiev has so many moves available to him. And so he's just thinking about what move should he choose that is going to be most uncomfortable for Magnus Carlsen.
Pretty much the same thought that's going through Magnus's head. Both players, they're playing this game in their mind so far rather than on the actual board. But we do finally see a decision from Artemiev. He did go for a pawn trade. He pushed a pawn. And now this last move by black, it is the most ambitious, locking down, gaining space on this left flank. And Jovanka, I've had this one before. You might be able to find my game in the database there from the white side in 2019 in the European Team Championship for England. And in that game, I think I just moved my bishop out. So white's bishop, white's light squared bishop, has a couple of diagonals to choose from, but the only way to justify white's push on this flank with the G-pawn earlier is to shuffle this white bishop to its longest possible diagonal. And there we go. Artemiev plays it. The most natural move in the position. White's going to hurry to castle the king and hurry to try and challenge black's pawns in the centre, because if you don't challenge black's pawns, then suddenly, actually, black is the one with more space. Black's pawns are further advanced, and if you can back that up, then it's going to be a bit dangerous. So, OK, Magnus brings his bishop out. And as far as I know, this last move is a bit of a rare one. Black has other options.
In fact, aren't too many moves in the database, but it does have some pedigree. Fabiano Caruana with the white pieces against Jordan van Forest in Vacancy earlier this year.
OK.
So in that particular game, white simply developed the dark squared bishop just to block the pin.
Yeah, and you mentioned that game in Vacancy earlier this year. Magnus was at that tournament, so Magnus would have been watching that game with interest. And Magnus, we've seen it before, right? We've tested his memory in many challenges. We've seen it in games. He's often able to recite positions from 50 years ago, 60 years ago. Of course, he's going to be aware of a game from earlier this year where he was present, and maybe he thinks that black had quite a good middle game position in that one, and he's just trying to copy. Sometimes that's the best thing to do when learning openings, rather than sitting there for hours just with a chessboard, working things out. OK, playing through books is good as well, but sometimes you just look at other players see these other strong players, what they do, and just copy them and learn from their ideas, borrow their best and their best ideas that do kind of resonate with your style.
Stand on the shoulders of giants. That's my philosophy when it comes to playing openings. You know, why play the opening like a, I don't know, international master? If I can play it either like a computer or like a super grandmaster. At least that way I'm making my opponent's life difficult. And, well, I do have a question for you, David, and it's related to our quiz of the day. It says, you know, we're asking what new technology would help chess. And Lee Bollinger answers, a 3D virtual reality headset and controller technology would be so cool with online chess. I agree, Lee. I think that's a great answer. But David, what I'm curious about is what technology would you like to see that would help chess?
That's a very, very difficult question. I'm not sure. I think technology's just progressed so far over the last few years that any further steps would be scary.
Yeah, right.
I mean, the next thing, I mean, we'll have computers just whispering in our ear, you know, that was a blunder, that was a terrible move, that was a bad plan. What are you doing?
That could be kind of cool because then you would get like the reactions. But then again, because you guys always tell me that because you're usually not using, we have a move.
Yep, so White's bishop just kind of challenging for this dark square diagonal, very sensible, developing a piece.
Yeah, so you usually analyze when you're talking here. Without computers, you just look at the position and give us what you think, and then, of course, sometimes, you know, looking over if there is something to check. But you say that just by looking at the bar, you can sort of guess what the next best move is, stuff like that. So that would be just huge help for the players.
Yeah, it's like a hint, right? Sometimes that's all you need. You just need to know the evaluation in order to have the confidence to go for your plans, to kind of continue along those lines. And if the evaluation bar shoots off in one direction just suddenly, then we know there's a big blunder, and then we know there's something to look for. It's like in a puzzle. If you give the players a puzzle and you say, OK, White to win in 2 moves, then they'll find it 100% of the time. But sometimes in chess, you don't expect your opponents to blunder, especially you don't expect Magnus to blunder. So it's just like being given a bit of a hint, being given a prod. And if we didn't have the evaluation bar here, we would be struggling to sense those moments, just like the players.
Exactly, and I have to say I totally agree with David. I mean, that is a big help, just having the bar there, just telling us about those critical moments and also giving us the confidence. So say, for instance, if you've sacrificed a piece, when you're playing by yourself, you have no idea whether you have adequate compensation. But if you see the bar all the way in your direction, you're like, hey, I have the computer's approval here. And you just can kind of play with the confidence that is required and that you'll be there hunting the king. Yeah. Whereas if you didn't know, maybe you'll be making like a little bit more cautious decisions. So absolutely, technology is a big help. Yeah. The thing that I would love to see in technology is actually a computer that mimics your potential opponent's style of play. So for instance, if I've been super competitive, I would go to the computer, play like David Howell. And the computer would say, David will play like this.
But isn't that kind of what the Play Magnus app is doing, though? It's mimicking Magnus at 10 years old, his playing style, and also now at 30 years old.
Right, it's doing it with Magnus. Yeah. But I would also like to see it done in a widespread thing.
Well, so it's out there for Jan Nepomniachtchi for preparations to the World Championship match. All he needs, he doesn't need to hire a team, nothing. He can just download the Play Magnus app and get the preparation started.
Yeah, play against Magnus age 30 just thousands of times. And try and crack the code there.
And maybe right before the World Championship starts, play Magnus at like 10 years old just to get some confidence. I beat him every time.
That sounds pretty good too. Actually, Nepomniachtchi did beat Magnus in real life at 10 years old, so he has that confidence stored away.
And, OK, we do have a new move on the board. Artemiev has jumped into the centre with his knight. And that's it. The players are now on their own. Now, this position has been analysed before, and Magnus is reacting in the way that the analysis went. And now, actually, through some transpositions, we've actually transposed into a game that Magnus Carlsen played with the white pieces against Sergei Mamedyarov. Sorry, not Sergei, Shakhriyar Mamedyarov.
So Magnus, he's very familiar with these types of patterns. And even if he didn't remember the exact move order, he's found a way to get into something he knows. And that's one of the trickiest things I find in chess, move orders. knowing exactly when to push pawns first or knights first or when to castle the king. And sometimes you know all the ideas, just putting together in the right order, that can be tricky. But, OK, Magnus, after this last move, after white has castled, now needs to make a decision because white has a really strong knight in the centre of the board. And Magnus, remember, his strategy is probably to be quite direct. You mentioned making it crazy. And he's been trying. He's pushed pawns. He's now attacking white's knight in the centre of the board with this last rook move as well. He's forcing Artemiev to make big decisions at an early stage. And notice the clock times. Artemiev, he's down 3 minutes on the clock, and it's still only move 12. So Magnus, by putting pressure on in the opening, by getting Artemiev out of his comfort zone, he's made a small gain on the clock, and that could be a big factor later.
And I'm so impressed with Magnus Carlsen's kind of like use of patterns and how he's able to draw from all his experience and just approach a fresh position and just apply everything he's learned before. Because believe it or not, we are now following a game, Magnus Carlsen against Daniel Dubov, and it was one that he lost in the Air Things Masters knockout rapid.
OK, so Magnus was
with the white pieces.
White in that game.
Yeah, so, I mean, I'm just impressed. I mean, and we were discussing this actually over lunch about how Magnus actually defeated Levon Aronian in their first encounter yesterday. And Magnus was just simply applying experience that he had accumulated from a position in the Sicilian as opposed to the King's Pawn opening.
Yeah.
And I'm just really impressed by that. Now, in the game between Magnus Carlsen and Daniel Dubov, Magnus continued with knight takes knight. OK. Should we show what happened in that game?
Sure,
While
yes.
Artemiev has a think. He's burning a lot of time. That's worrying for Artemiev fans. But, OK, the most natural move, because there is pressure against the white knight, is to deal with that pressure. And, OK, knight takes knight, as you mentioned, Jovanka. Going for the trade, and black will recapture.
That's right.
This has happened, actually.
OK, and in that game, Magnus immediately... Actually, he played exactly like Artemiev. So he challenged black's pawn wedge there on the left side, and Dubov answered with bishop takes knight. And now we have a deviation.
OK, so Magnus immediately not actually capturing this knight, which Dubov used to win against Magnus. Instead, Magnus has come up with a new move. He's for sure studied this exact position before. We've got there through a different move order. We've got there in a bit of a roundabout way, but this last pawn push by black, it looks a bit odd, it looks mysterious, but the justification is that if white takes a pawn now, white will go a pawn up. Black cannot touch this pawn because after the black pawn takes, suddenly you've opened up this bishop's diagonal. This bishop will pounce and take a pawn, and with a double attack, this would actually be winning for white due to the double attack against black's rooks. But instead, Magnus's idea, if white captures this pawn, is to leave it for one move and create a pin. He'll bring his own bishop out and suddenly find itself on a great diagonal. Now the white pawn cannot move or should not move, because if it does, then the black bishop will feast on a white rook, and suddenly black will be material ahead. Black will have an extra rook for just a bishop. And this is Magnus's idea with this pawn push to develop his bishop on a decent diagonal. How will Artemiev react? It does look like white is under a bit of pressure at this early stage. His position is fine, but he has to deal with these instant moves coming. OK, he does trade, and Magnus instantly, again, bringing his bishop out, attacking this pawn. I'm liking where the black bishops are standing.
Yes.
I think they're on great diagonals right now.
And incidentally, until that pawn captured the other pawn, well, we were following the game between Magnus Carlsen and Shakhriyar Mamedyarov. So, again, Magnus is thinking about how he can make Artemiev's life difficult. And
that's why I love these flank openings, Jovanka. So not necessarily pushing the king's pawn forward on move one or the queen's pawn forward on move one. Actually developing with the knight, developing from the side, pushing your pawns, because it's just so rich, and it's quite unexplored territory, actually, compared to some of these main lines that you read about in books that you can study on Chessable. There's so much more in chess that still hasn't been fully worked out, that hasn't been explored, and that's what Magnus is trying to use against Artemiev. And, OK, meanwhile, white's queen has just kind of slid to the side. Black's bishop has captured a pawn as expected, and now white's rook is under fire from that black bishop, so it has to move. He has to pick a square for that rook. Time situation, though, is pretty dire for Artemiev. He's down now nearly 7 minutes on the clock.
Yes.
That is a worrying sign. He needs to speed up if he wants to beat the world champion in this final.
I wonder how many times during Artemiev's games that we say clock or time, because it's always such a big factor when he plays his games. The clock is just up in our face all the time.
Yeah. I think if it's still in the middle game and he goes down to 1 minute, he's going to be in big trouble. But if it's an end game, he's shown he can handle it, right?
Yeah.
Yes.
His instincts are so good there.
Yeah, he can play for such a long time, only gaining those 10 seconds, like with just seconds left, gaining 10 seconds. And then we say, OK, wow, this must be over soon. And then he just keeps playing.
I know, and he plays great chess in the end game, as David's highlighted. And, yeah, we do have a move, the rook relocating to the left. And for our quiz of the day, we're asking what new technology would help chess. And Kyle Akalu said heart rate monitors when the players are playing.
Yes.
That was good. And Blockchain Ghost says augmented reality that allows you to assume a role of a piece on the chessboard and enter the mind of your opponent's pieces. I like it. And Arbel Gideon says, at some time, mankind will have progressed to the point where a beginner to chess can just install a chip and become as good as David Howell.
Why limit yourself there, you know? Aim higher. I like the idea there.
Yeah, and if you two want to enter our quiz of the day, then you have to tweet us by using 3 hashtags. Please don't forget that. Hashtag Chess Champs, hashtag Opera, and hashtag Aimchess US Rapid. And there you can see we have an amazing Opera chess bundle. Chessable course, 1 year Play Magnus Plus membership, 1 year Chess24 Premium. So, yup, I love your answers so far, but don't forget, you've got to tweet us by using those 3 hashtags.
You're basically winning, becoming a better chess player.
Exactly. And, you know, what better way? You're using technology to do it. And we have seen a trade of pieces on the board.
OK, so a bit of a committal trade there by Magnus Carlsen. Usually we talk about the bishop pair quite a lot. Having 2 bishops is better than having a bishop and a knight in general. But here, the pawn structure in the centre is blocked. There's lots of closed lines, not too many open diagonals, especially for that white dark squared bishop. That's why Magnus initiated the trade. And maybe he's just saying, OK, knights are better than bishops in this type of position. And now he has jumped in with his knight to the centre of the board as black. And white should not get tempted to take that knight. Yes, the knights are probably better than bishops in this type of position, but that white bishop, the white light-squared bishop in front of the king, if it ever disappears, if it ever trades itself off, will just leave too many light-squared weaknesses. And, OK, Magnus is saying, you didn't trade, you still have your light-squared bishop, but I'm going to attack you anyway. And he's throwing Harry the H-pawn down the board, black's pawn marching. It's just going to try and loosen up the position around white's king. Now that the knights have disappeared, white lacks his potentially best defender. And Magnus, he's just probing for weaknesses. He's thinking that he's locked down the centre of the board. He's not too worried about that left flank either, so he's switching attentions. And that is the type of move. When you're low on time, when you're down to 5 minutes, it will cause you to just worry a bit. And if you have to keep an eye on every single part of the board, it's extremely high, the chances of a blunder. So, yeah, Artemiev now, the momentum's against him. He has to do something to switch things up. I don't see it, though. Maybe he can try and get active with the white rooks. One of the white rooks is blocked in, so you maybe have to lift the other one up the board and then double them up, team them up together. But that is slow. And meanwhile, black, with that last pawn push, he has made his intentions clear. Yeah, Magnus, he's definitely keeping the queens on for a reason. I can just feel this already. His pre-match strategy is to keep the game in this middle game and try and attack from there.
Wow. All right, so it is a scary intention we're seeing from the world champion.
Yeah. There's so many times that I've been playing chess, I think, oh, I've got everything under control, but maybe I'm low on time. And then suddenly the opponent throws this pawn up the board and I'm thinking, oh, no, my king. What about my king? And, yeah, that's what Artemiev is going to be worrying about. This white king, it doesn't look too open, but if that pawn is able to step forward again, trade off a set of pawns, for example, then open lines will appear. And because black has the more advanced minor pieces, the black knight in the centre and the black bishop, then it means he's more ready for a potential attack.
Yeah, I must admit that is a familiar sensation. But I confess, I'm a little bit rating biased. So, for instance, the Grandmaster does this type of move to me. I'm like, oh, take care, hold the fort. But if someone lower rated than me does it, I'm like, yeah, come at me if you think you're hard enough. So, I mean, totally fickle.
Yeah, that's the type of pawn move, right? It's all down to judgment. It's not necessarily a concrete threat, but yeah, it's purely speculative. And yeah, psychologically, it's probably stronger than it is objectively. And that's all that Magnus needs right now. And that has also forced White's queen to step back. So that White queen is eyeing up a pawn on this diagonal. And Magnus will just deal with that. As soon as you start seeing your opponent retreat as well, you just get a bit happy. You get a bit excited. And Artemiev, all of his pieces have just retreated to this back row. It's looking like this might be a signal for Black to go forward. Yeah. Black can bring his queen into the game, for example.
I'm just, I admit, again, sometimes I'm a little bit cliched, and when I see a move like that on the board, you know, you're like, you go backwards, I go forwards. And I feel that, yes, the White queen is attacking the pawn, but that is just an invitation for me to actually push forward with the pawn one step further. And I was just looking forward to softening up the shield around White's king.
Yep, that looks pretty good. So two most attractive options for Black, probably to push that pawn, like you say, Ivanka. That seems automatic to me. Or you just defend it, you bring the Black queen out and you say, OK, you've retreated your queen to a passive square, I'm going to bring my queen out to an active square. So Black's queen can maybe come out and sit next to that H-pawn, just ready, just hinting at some potential attack. OK, Magnus, lots of tempting moves here. Which one is he going to choose? He's got this big time advantage, and he's trying to invest some of that time now in order to maybe create some immediate threats. I think the simple approach, just push that pawn, bring that Black queen out. OK, he does push the pawn. And OK, Magnus making a face there, raising his eyebrows.
That is strange.
Why won't he take it instead? Or
you wouldn't really take that pawn because you know, we talked about king safety, and it's very important for a king to have a very compact pawn shield around it. If you start opening up lines against your king, then it makes it easier to attack. So you don't want to be capturing pawns.
Why move it then?
That is the question. He's moved it forward. So what Artemiev plans to do is he plans to have some kind of like accelerated pawn shield. So he's trying to say, I will keep the pawn cover, but I'm just going to do it so I'm grabbing a little bit more space. It's risky strategy.
I think he mainly wants to keep lines closed. And if you left the pawn where it was after a trade of pawns, at least one line would become open. So, yes, it's really risky to push pawns forward in front of your own king, but at least there's no immediate lines open towards White's king. And the only way to open lines are pawn trades. So White bypassing that pawn trade, it does come at the price of loosening up White's structure. So White does have weaknesses that Black will soon go after. Meanwhile, just a couple of pawn pushes on the other flank by both sides. Yeah, just slightly improving their pawn structure, but Magnus now is going to switch his attentions fully, I think, towards the White king.
Wow, I mean, the Black pieces, they're just so far up the board.
They're kind of inching forward. Yeah. I mean, this is a scary situation, and it's not just the pieces inching forward, the bar is also going that way as well. I mean, just take a look at White's pieces. This is the big problem. Look at that bishop that Magnus has sitting on the b3 square. I mean, it's just containing the might of two rooks.
It's like a cork in the bottle, and the two rooks are stuck in the bottle. That Black bishop is the cork, just saying you're not getting out. And yeah, that Black bishop, phenomenal piece.
It is just fantastic. And then take a look at Black's knight in the centre, the definition of an octo knight. This is desperate times, actually, for Artemiev. I mean, he has to survive now here. I mean, the one good thing is that he hasn't got a material disadvantage. Mm-hmm. You know, everything has its positives.
And most things are protected for White, for now at least. White's bishops, they don't look great, but if things come open later, they will become strong. And, OK, it feels like the next 5-6 moves, that's when Magnus has to strike while Artemiev is passive, while those White rooks are terrible. And that's why he is thinking again, I would just want to bring the Black queen out. I would want to maybe bring one of the Black rooks into the game. He does this. He lifts that Black rook up. It doesn't look like it's going anywhere on the line that it stands, so he's going to swing it across and go for the White king, if possible. Meanwhile, Artemiev also improving one of the White rooks. Yeah. It's about those rooks now. All of Black's pieces look pretty good, apart from the rooks and queen. Yes. And Artemiev improving his worst place pieces as well.
Yep, and the question is, how is Magnus going to start improving and converting his advantage, which is at the minute dynamic, into something a little bit more concrete? And he comes out with the queen. And
Bar doesn't like it.
No. And on that subject, on the bar not liking it. Can I share with you one very cool answer on the quiz of the day? So we're asking what new technology would help chess, and Sushant Chaturvedi says it would be great to see someone come up with a technology where every time the player blunders, they get a small tingling shock so that they realise they made a mistake. And I like that concept because, you know, maybe your opponent doesn't get it, but you get it. Ooh.
You can have like those that you have around your neck.
Shock collars.
Yeah. And, you know, depending on how bad the blunder is, you just amp up the... Cruel!
I love it.
Yeah.
It needs to be in existence. So we move on the board.
Yeah, meanwhile, quite a committal move again from Artemiev. He's pushed a pawn forward, but pawns don't move backwards. Yes, that pawn is attacking the black queen, forcing her to retreat, but look at the black knight now. That has become an outpost, the square it sits on. It can never be challenged by a white pawn anymore. So by kind of skipping past this black knight, Artemiev has said, yeah, you're going to have that strong piece for the rest of the game. He thinks it's more important to go and kick away the black queen. And yes, temporarily, this looks OK for white, but long-term, he might live to regret just giving up all influence over that central square where the black knight sits. And now Magnus, he'll simply retreat his queen. He'll pick a square, and he'll say, OK, you've weakened yourself. That's fine.
So is this a game where you say draw is the least likely result?
Right now, yes. Yeah, still a long, long way. It's possible we could see a scenario where, somehow the queens come off and, I don't know, white's rooks get active and maybe white has enough counterplay to make the draw.
It just feels like there's a lot of pressure in here.
There's a lot of tension, and I don't see any trades happening anytime soon. How is white ever going to trade off black's strong bishop, for example? How does white trade off black's strong knight without giving up his light squared bishop, which holds things together? You don't want to ever take that black knight with your light square bishop because you won't be able to contest those light squares. And if trades don't happen, then all three results will be possible. So meanwhile, white's bishop's gone to the side, again harassing that black queen. The black queen, maybe not too happy that she's getting kicked around right now, but once Magnus finds a safe square for her, at least he has a clear plan. He's going to bring the black rooks to the centre, and he's going to try and maybe even move that black knight at some point, and the black rooks are going to start creating threats.
Yeah,
where would you put the black queen, Ivanka?
I don't know, is the short answer to that. Probably, somehow I want her to be a little bit flexible. I kind of want her to also have her eye on the left side of the board. So I'm kind of thinking maybe she should step to the side, but...
Yeah, because I was going to ask, is it important, because you've been talking about this side on the board where the kings are, is it important to keep the queen on that side?
Ideally, but the good thing about queens is they can kind of keep an eye on that side from afar. So maybe across some diagonals, she doesn't need to... That's why he shifts the queen to this diagonal. So the black queen on a dark square diagonal might have some influence later on. You don't necessarily have to attack from the front with queens. Maybe you can attack from the side. OK, the evaluation bar doesn't like that move too much.
I think it will stabilise.
OK, you think it will stabilise?
Yeah, because I can't see an immediate thing. I mean, first I thought, hang on, is white queen coming into the left? But no. There are no consequences.
So, this move, it looked very healthy for Magnus. I think that's a decent square. The reason I slightly panicked was because, OK, the black queen is on the same line as white's rook, but as you mentioned, Ivanka, no way to capitalise on that right now.
No.
And Magnus, if he gets a move as black, he's going to activate his remaining passive piece, that black rook in the corner. Okay, so that's why Artemiev is speeding up the game if he can, pushing a pawn forward, attacking the black rook.
But that is a very committal move. And
now, we've used that word a lot, committal, because... pawn pushers, they always are. There are always downsides. Yes, you're gaining space. Yes, you're gaining time attacking pieces, but this pawn's not moving backwards. And suddenly black's queen on this diagonal looks a lot happier than she did. So Magnus will just move that rook, retreat it.
And Artemiev actually playing a very neat queen retreat and attacking that pawn on the h4 square. Now, the reason why I was a little bit indecisive about whether I liked that pawn push that Artemiev made was to do with the fact, and it's a little bit long-term, is that if Magnus wants to open up the position, he only needs to make one small pawn move, which is to challenge that pawn by picking up his pawn that's on g7 and pushing it one square, and then suddenly chaos ensues. And
so this would guarantee opening up a line. I'm not sure whose king this actually benefits right now, because both kings could become open. But you're right, Jovanka, at some point, black might try this type of idea. I think right now, the #1 priority is probably to defend this pawn. It's hard to do that. There's only one piece with which you can defend this pawn, and that is the black queen. For example, you could slide her back to defend this pawn along the diagonal. The downside, though, is that white's rook can suddenly get active and grab a pawn. To be honest, I would prefer to give up the pawn on this square as black rather than this strong pawn, because this strong pawn on the right side is going to contribute towards a direct attack against white's king. And then I think black, for example, can bring the queen out and start creating some threats of his own. I think this is what Magnus should go for. If, in the current position, he just lets this pawn drop, then the white queen gets active. It's not even about the pawns. You don't want to let white's queen get active. And here, I think Magnus, he just has to be objective. He has to choose which pawn to give up. Artemiev, with these sneaky little manoeuvres, is going to win a pawn. It's either this one or this one, but to me, it's clear which pawn to give up for Magnus. Definitely cling on to this guy if you can. And right now, yeah, maybe he's considering just retreating with the queen. Maybe he's considering something along the lines of your idea, Jovanka, maybe pushing a pawn at some point, maybe at some point even moving the knight back to an outpost. But OK, first he does keep that pawn alive. He brings his queen back and he's going to reroute her. Artemiev immediately going one pawn up, not hesitating, being materialistic, because it's what he has to do. You might as well suffer for something. But now I expect to see Magnus play a move such as bringing the queen forward. There are other options, but this one looks the most tempting to me.
Yep. I 100% agree with that, because, yes, like you say, black has sacrificed the pawn, but he has overwhelming dominance over the position. I mean,
he sacrifices another pawn, Magnus Carlsen, offering to go 2 pawns down. Artemiev said,
yes, please.
Yeah, yes, please. I think you're bluffing. But Magnus, will he bluff? I don't think that's world champion style to bluff. He's brought his queen out now, so he's 2 pawns down as black. But look at these 2 pieces. They are extremely strong, and they're the best attacking combo, remember, queen and knight together. And let's ignore the evaluation bar for now. It's going back towards the centre. Yeah. Black is 2 pawns down, but the fact that the computer says, OK, it's still roughly balanced, means that black's sacrifice has been justified. And if black gets more time, there's actually quite a big threat in the position. If the white rook moves across, for example, then the black knight can just step back, and this would be a double attack against this pawn, which is the only shelter of white's king, or also against this pawn in the centre. So unleashing an attack, unleashing the black rook, and I think this would be scary for Artemiev to face with under 1 minute now. Yeah. And especially when low on time, having a weak king is not ideal.
Yeah, the king looks very open. You've been talking about it for a long time now, that it looks open around the white king.
Totally.
And now it is completely open.
Yeah, when a king is open, that means it's vulnerable to attack. And it means that it's all about who has the dynamic initiative, who has the momentum. And David highlighted a really critical knight maneuver. And OK, Magnus doesn't go for it.
Switching his attention. He's trying to conquer this open C line. So he's trying to get rid of white's most active rook. And if we do see a trade of rooks, his other black rook is maybe going to try and infiltrate from the side. So he's tied down white, actually, to the defence of several pawns. And now he's switching focus.
And he's... Oh, hang on a second. I was just going to say this wasn't possible, because I was thinking... I'm too excited. David, I need you to...
Whoa, yeah, look at the bar.
Black has actually blocked up this line now, blocked up the C line. So white's queen under fire from that bishop. And because the connection between the white rooks has been broken, black is also threatening to capture one of white's rooks with his own rook. So a double threat now for Magnus Carlsen. And I think you're right, Jovanka. This is going to cost white material. How are you going to save the queen and your rook at the same time? You either have to give up the queen for a couple of rooks, but the queen here is by far the most important piece.
And we're going to see it on the board.
OK, I was going to say maybe you could sacrifice a rook with a bishop as well, but now white's queen has fallen. White's gained 2 rooks in the process, but look at the white king. Without the white queen, how are you going to defend it? That king looks so vulnerable.
I mean, first of all, you know, white would really love to put the rooks on the top row, but they can't do that because queen takes pawn is now in the air. And now the queen and the bishop have coordinated for an attack on the G4 pawn. And this is it. When it comes to piece, positions with piece imbalances, it's all about king safety. And white's king, I'm sorry, it's got no cover. It's doomed.
Yeah, look at that evaluation bar. It confirms your assessment completely there, Jovanka. White's king. I mean, it would love a knight around. It would love a queen around to defend, but no, those pieces don't exist. And now all that black needs to do is move his bishop, and on this G line, it's disaster. It's actually checkmate in a few moves now. Black's bishop coming to attack that white bishop, which is pinned, and checkmate comes. Artemiev resigns.
Wow, what a start to the final, you guys. After 36 moves and only playing for 39 minutes, Magnus Carlsen with the black pieces wins the first game against Vladislav Artemiev, and we could see it on Artemiev's face. Disaster start to the final. Wow.
It was a complete collapse, and I kind of lost my words there, because I was so speechless that Artemiev would fall for something like that. But, you know, he had a difficult position, and sometimes this happens. After a good strategy, there often comes a good tactical blow.
And it definitely seemed like this was a masterpiece by Magnus Carlsen. David, take us through it.
Yeah, strategic masterpiece, it has to be said. And Magnus, after creating this kind of strategic dominance here with really strong pieces for black, this bishop on an outpost supported by a pawn, this knight on an outpost supported by a pawn, and also black's queen off on a fantastic square. Here, after this challenge of the rooks, Artemiev, he just had to say, yes, your pieces are too strong. Just exchange. He had to trade off, and he also had to just knuckle down and defend. For example, starting with dropping his bishop back, trying to eliminate this strong black knight. It's still very scary. Magnus Carlsen would be in the driver's seat with a big attack, with his rook coming into the position. But Artemiev is alive. Instead here, he blundered. He cracked under the pressure because of the time situation, but also because of the board not being able to find these really difficult moves. He brought his rook across, thinking he's connecting, defending, but Magnus said, no, that coordination is easy to break, bringing the bishop back, attacking the white queen and attacking the white rook. This is what forced Artemiev to say, yes, actually, I have to give up this queen. That's the only way. He took black's rook, and OK, winning 2 black rooks is quite good materially, but it is all about this king, and there's just no way to defend it. There's too many threats. This bishop is attacking a pawn, the black queen also attacking a more vulnerable pawn, and yeah, simply no defense. We saw a few moves later, if we just fast forward, that Magnus was about to win, conquering this square with his queen and his bishop. It's actually just checkmate in a couple of moves.
Explosive start to the final in the Aimchess US Rapid. Game 2 is coming up in about 13 minutes, and Magnus Carlsen will have the white pieces. He is in the lead. Vladislav Artemiev, he still has 3 games to go today to find a win and to tie the match. But Magnus Carlsen, in the next one, he will have the white pieces, and he now only needs 1.5 more points to win the first match in the big final. Now, coming up after the next game, we're going to have the moment of truth with both of these 2 players looking over their Aimchess stats, and also, of course, talking about how technology is changing chess today. And now, though, maybe one of the biggest highlights of today, we're going to be joined by Levon Aronian in a few seconds. He was supposed to play for 3rd place today together with Alireza Firouzja, but Firouzja, being sick, pulled out, so that means Levon Aronian has been awarded 3rd place in the tournament, and also 3rd place in the overall Meltwater Champions Chess Tour standings. We are waiting for Levon Aronian to get ready. So, are you catching your breath, Ivanka, after that dramatic start to the final?
Yeah, I mean, I was a bit shocking, because just when I was going to highlight this trap, suddenly it appeared on the board, and I felt like one of these sports commentators who's like, thingy-majiggy. You can't play that. Yeah. But yeah, no, I mean, what can I say about that? That was an awesome display by Magnus, and it's like he fine-tuned everything to perfection. His openings worked well. It was a good strategy, and Artemiev needs to play a little bit more fast and maybe choose the openings which are a little bit more critical if he wants to beat Magnus Carlsen.
Yeah. That's what it is about for Artemiev. Now we're joined by Grandmaster, world number 5, the great Levon Aronian. Welcome to our show, Levon. Now, did you see that previous game, the first game in the final here?
Of course.
What did you think about that crazy game?
Well, it was a very sharp, very interesting game, and I think the main problem of Artemiev was that he was playing too slow, and the time became a factor when the position became so sharp.
So obviously you played a final against Vladislav Artemiev. You won that one in gold money, Asian Rapid, was it? So is this basically the tactics that Magnus has to use, sort of get Artemiev down on the clock?
It worked for me.
Yeah.
After yesterday, what am I to advise to Magnus?
And of course, then facing Magnus in the semifinals here, and also seeing Magnus in this first game here, we know the World Championship match is coming up in about 2 months. So how strong is Magnus right now?
I think generally, I'm not sure if it's Magnus or if it's the general level of recent, but I think the gap has narrowed a lot. I do feel that Magnus is not unbeatable, and he does make mistakes. Even playing with me yesterday, I think that last game, well, of course, I cannot really say that I played well myself throughout the match. But at some point, he gave me a chance to win the game, which is not how Magnus normally plays.
Now, if you were his coach then for Vladislav Artemiev, what sort of tips would you give him? What does he have to do to have chances against Magnus?
I think generally pushing and trying to put pressure against Magnus by playing aggressive chess is the way to go.
And then obviously we were looking forward to follow your match also against 18-year-old Alireza Ruizia. He's 6, so that didn't happen. Were you sad to not be able to play chess now in this weekend?
Yes and no. I like playing against him. He's very creative. But at the same time, I'm packing my things to move to St. Louis. So it was... I would say in any other circumstance, I would be unhappy, but in this circumstance, I accept it with gratitude.
Yeah, wow. It must be such a busy time for you. So basically the plan for you is to move now within the next few days to St. Louis?
Yeah, actually tomorrow night my flight is.
Wow. Well, Levon, that is a huge sort of event in your life, of course, moving from Armenia to the US. How are you feeling about this now?
I'm very excited to start a new life in St. Louis, in a city that I like a lot, and a city where I have many strong chess players living, so a lot of sparring opportunities. I know Yerevan is like Moscow, I guess, another city where you have plenty of opportunities to work with very good players. But I think at the moment, St. Louis is probably even better than Moscow.
Yeah.
And Levon, we know that you finished 3rd in the tour, and that stands you in good stead for the finals. Are you going to be using some of those opportunities to spar with players to prepare for our finals?
Oh, yeah, probably. We'll play some Blitz with Fabi and play some... We already... spoke about it, so yeah, I look forward to that.
Yeah, you mentioned it was very interesting in an interview the other day that you really feel you have become a lot better in rapid chess and online chess over the last during the Meltwater Champions Chess Tour. So how will you sum up this year for you so far, of course?
Well, I mean, considering all the things that happened in my life, I'm actually quite happy where I am now. I know I haven't played classical chess for more than a year, but I do feel that the hard work and generally the changes that I went through made me stronger. So I look forward to play over the board again.
And do you have any specific chess ambitions that you'd like to share with us?
Ooh.
I always have the same ambitions, to see how far I can get. So that's my only ambition.
Yeah. Yeah, David.
Do you have other tournaments on the line after our tour finals?
After tour finals, I will play the Grand Swiss in Riga, hopefully. And after that, I don't really know. It's a bit unpredictable, but I'm hoping there will be a World Blitz and Rapid Championship. I would like to test how does my online success translate to over the board format.
That's going to be super interesting to follow.
Yeah, I think the last World Championship Blitz that I won was, I don't know. I was a little boy then, I think 10 years ago or more.
Yeah, was it around 2011?
Something like that.
Yeah, I think Wow, okay. It's going to be interesting to see.
Yeah, so Levon, what are your predictions for the rest of this final between Magnus and Artemiev?
Well, Magnus definitely is kind of a guy who, if he gets to the finals, if he gets to the clutch time, as they say in sports, becomes extremely motivated and extremely strong. It's going to be a tough challenge for Vladislav, despite of him being a very, very good and talented player. I think it will be very tough. And I thought about it before today's match. I thought it's tough when Magnus feels that it's the final match, then he becomes very strong. So the best thing to beat him before he gets to the final.
All right, Levon, we really appreciate you taking your time to join us in your busy schedule, and best of luck on your big adventure now, moving over to the US.
Thank you so much, guys.
Thank you for joining us. Levon Aronian, wow, yeah. Huge figure in world chess, number 5, moving over to the US. And he's talking about getting a lot better at online chess and rapid chess over the course of the Meltwater Champions Chess Tour. And we're doing a little bit of a recap for the online year of our players, because using Aimchess, we can actually check out what they have done playing online throughout 2021. So now we're going to check out Vladislav Artemiev, David, using Aimchess. What is happening?
Yeah, so we're going to check out some of Artemiev's stats. We know that he plays a lot on Lichess, a lot of blitz games in particular, and here we can see some numbers, some interesting numbers. We see 609 total games in 2021. He also has an anonymous account, I think, but this is his named account, Konevlad. He plays a lot of bullet chess as well, a decent number, a couple of hundred games here. He spent 41 hours playing online. It's a lot of time in 2021 so far. 25,000 moves played as well. Most of those with the pawn, that's pretty normal. 15,000 almost there. A lot with the knight, a lot with the rook, less with the bishop. I'm slightly surprised here. Bishops and knights tend to be the two most common pieces you play with other than the pawn. So maybe showing some tendency there to trade off his bishops quite early in the game. We also see that Artemiev, he's played 65 games in one day. That was his maximum. He's also played 171 games in March, so definitely in preparation mode there, playing a lot of blitz games in March. We can play through some of his quick checkmates here, beating a very strong player, a 2,700 rated player in 24 moves.
Wow.
This shows exactly how strong he is at blitz chess, which we actually saw yesterday against Firouzja as well. We see his blitz graph, and this is definitely something that the viewers at home should check out as well. A lot you can learn here. Winning most of his games against SBR. It's hard to read this name. Yeah, against, actually, I think I know who this is, a very strong grandmaster from Siberia. But, okay, more opening stats here. The modern defense is Vladislav's most successful opening. Maybe we'll see this employed against Magnus Carlsen if Artemyev's in a must-win situation, pushing this pawn forward rather than maybe a more traditional move in the center of the board. And more opening stats here. Also fascinating numbers that can be learnt from. I know a lot of the top chess players will be checking out these stats after the tournament on Aimchess. Meanwhile, win rate and how he wins his games, mostly by resignation, a little bit by time, and a little bit by checkmate. Also, mostly castling kingside, but no matter where he castles, scoring pretty well.
Yeah.
He does like to castle, though.
All right, and these were the online stats for Vladislav Artemyev, playing, what was it, over 40 hours of chess so far this year. And when this game finishes, we're going to show you Magnus's stats. And I have a feeling it's more than 40 hours for the world champion. And here we go, game 2. Magnus Carlsen is up by 1 point, has the white pieces here. And what are we seeing?
It's the Queen's Gambit. Magnus may be inspired by the Netflix show, but also just very standard stuff. Very common opening. And it's the Queen's Gambit declined, not accepting the Gambit. And Black not taking White's pawn there in the center, just solidifying his structure. How will Magnus respond? He brings his knight out. Magnus making a bit of a face there. I think again, it's a bit like the last game. The opening stages might be a bit cagey, might be a bit nervy. Both sides just trying to pick an opening variation that will be uncomfortable for the opponent. Actually, some of these online stats we checked out a few minutes ago, it's a lot of games between Magnus Carlsen and Vladislav Artemyev. They do know each other very well online from Blitz and Bullet Chess. So they know each other's tendencies in the opening. And that's why just a bit of guesswork, a bit of mind games going on at this early stage.
And I'm kind of curious as to what move Artemyev has in mind, whether I was going to ask this question, whether he will repeat what he played against Shakhriar Mamedyarov, and that was to challenge immediately in the center, and it has happened. So in that particular game, Mamedyarov actually responded with pawn takes pawn. There it is. And after pawn takes pawn, then he simply developed the knight. And the game was actually quite tense. Okay. It was a very kind of well-known line. Maybe I can show it exactly how it happened.
Yeah, let's check out exactly what happened in that game. So we do see the Tarrasch variation of the Queen's Gambit if we just fast forward to the current position. And okay, Jovanka, you mentioned White developing the knight being the most common move, just solidifying the centre. That's very common. Black
followed suit. No, he developed his Queen's Knight.
Okay, putting pressure on the centre. It's all about this pawn right now in the middle of the board.
And after pawn takes pawn, this is where the fireworks happened. The pawn stepped forward.
Yep, so White putting pressure on Black's central pawn suddenly, and Black dealing with that pressure by attacking White's knight. The White knight can jump towards the centre of the board, to the edge as well. And now
Bishop takes pawn.
Black can give up a bishop. This is quite likely what we'll see. It looks like a sacrifice. It is a sacrifice, but Black gains back the bishop next turn with a check and a double attack, hitting the White king and hitting the White knight. And okay, we might be headed towards a very similar position, but first Magnus is going on the attack. He's playing pawn takes pawn. He's going after Black's central pawn. And now we definitely expect the central pawn to step forward. It's attacked twice by White's knight and by the White queen. And if the Black pawn does step forward, as it does, we might see a transposition into the line we just showed. White's knight now has to run away to the side or to the centre, both decent squares, both have pros and cons. And then if this does happen, Black can just give up his bishop. And again, a check. And, OK, Magnus chooses the side of the board, but this check will pick up the White knight next turn. So that's what I'm expecting. Bishop takes pawn right now by Artemyev, in the game position with White's knight on the corner. And after this bishop takes the pawn, play will go on. It's roughly level, but White will have the bishop pair.
Yeah.
And, OK, let's see what Artemyev decides to do. Maybe he won't go for the pawn immediately. There are other options that I've seen in the past.
Definitely.
Slightly more ambitious options, but also more risky options. What will his strategy be after suffering in that first game?
Yeah, I'm also curious as well whether it would be bishop takes pawn or whether he would make a move such as sacrificing a pawn by attacking the knight with a pawn, picking up the B pawn, moving it 2 squares. And whilst Artemyev is choosing what style he is going to meet the world champion with, well, we do have our quiz of the day where we are asking what new technology would help chess. And in order to we have an amazing prize up for grabs. It's a chessboard DVT4 course. It's a 1-year Play Magnus Plus membership. And if that's not enough, 1-year Chess24 Premium membership. And Job Worth says, the evaluation bar being able to consider the time situation left for both players would be a cool future feature. I think so too. Then making an assessment. Hey, you don't have so much time on the clock. I'm gonna add some points there.
Definitely. That's where AI comes in, right? Just making those predictions.
And EW says it's the year 2033. Skynet 0.1, Alpha 0 3.4 gone rogue and forces humans to play chess well. Using Terminators to weed out the weaker chess players, the resistance led by the world's top 100 chess players begins. And then you have the Terminator theme song, which I can't quite recall at the precise minute. Can you, David?
Not off the top of my head.
No, yes, you do.
It's been a few years. It's been a few years since I've watched the Terminator.
And Avinda says it would be really cool with a magnetic chessboard connected to Wi-Fi, which could make it possible to play over-the-board chess without being in the same room as the opponent. When you make a move, it will automatically move on the opponent's chessboard. That's kind of cool. I think it exists.
I think we've got at least something very similar to that already. In action. So, technology speeding up.
And do remember that if you want to enter our quiz of the day, then you can do so, but you have to tweet using 3 hashtags, ChessChamps, Opera and Aimchess US Rapid. And loving your suggestions so far.
So it will basically be the online over-the-board chess. You could you could play an online opponent, but you could actually move the pieces, for example.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. Just from the comfort of your own bed, just move a pawn, and it's transmitted all the way across the world. Maybe that's the future.
That's quite nice.
Okay. Meanwhile, no moves on the board. Artemiev, again, reckless clock handling. It's only move 6, and he's burnt 4 minutes already. And when Levon came on, a really interesting interview there, when he said Artemiev's best chance is to attack Magnus from an early stage. I think if he can attack Magnus or get Magnus into an endgame, then he'll be happy. But it's not necessarily Artemiev's style to go on the attack this early. So maybe he's just pondering upon a strategy change. Maybe he's just thinking, Magnus won't let me get into an endgame anyway. Maybe now is the time. And as Jovanka mentioned, Black has a few options, a few really ambitious options, but also a few safer options.
And he goes for it.
Okay, he sacrifices a pawn. Artemiev, he just pushes forward, attacking White's knight on the side of the board. That has been met by en passant, White's pawn capturing, as if the black pawn had just moved forward 1 square, not allowing that black pawn to bypass it. And now Vladislav Artemiev again in the tank, thinking, will he just recapture that pawn, Jovanka?
He should. According to the numbers, everyone is playing pawn takes pawn. If he wants to be really, really fruity and give up another pawn, then he can actually develop his knight. But only one brave soul has done that. 96 other people has chosen just to capture the pawn, and he makes it. I mean, but I'm a bit surprised at how long that decision took him.
Yeah, and Magnus, meanwhile, again, you've seen this body language from him. When he stares off to the right, that's clearly his face when he's trying to recall something, trying to remember. And he just stared off to the right for a few seconds and then pushed a pawn. And that pawn push is designed for 2 reasons. Firstly, to develop that, protect that white knight on the side of the board, but also to create an escape square for it. So the square that pawn used to sit on has now been opened up for the white knight to retreat to later in the game.
This looks so strange, though.
It's bizarre, this opening, I must say. I've only seen it a few times at this Grandmaster level. It's extremely rare. All the pieces sat at home. It's as if the players are just forgetting the rules. The only piece that has developed is that white knight, but knight's on the rim of dim. That white knight also not well placed.
And, well, OK, so Magnus playing this pawn, I mean, should we expect a queenside castle, or because all the pieces are basically still in there, so
so he'll have to take some time, but his king would most definitely go over to the right, to the king side. It was just he's going to take time, and he has to fend off Artemiev's lead in development. So Artemiev, I think he should be developing his knight. He should be accelerating the play as quickly as possible.
Yeah, I mean, you mentioned lead in development, Jovanka. Black hasn't developed any pieces yet, but it's quicker for him to do that because White hasn't pushed any 4 pawns on the right half. That means it takes ages for White, especially for the light squared bishop to come out, for White's knight, and then the king to castle. So it's going to take White at least, 4 moves to bring a knight out, push a pawn, bring the bishop out, and then castle. For Black, it might only take 2 or 3. Because, for example, the Black dark square bishop can already come out and give check to the White king along this dark square diagonal. That gains a bit of time as well. Then the Black knight moves, and then Black's ready to castle. So Black is about to gain a lot of time. That's why Black has sacrificed a pawn and is pretty happy about it, because he's going to gain a lot of moves over the next few turns. He's really going to speed things up. But he does need to speed up on the clock as well, not just on the board. He needs to get those pieces into the centre, bring them out, create threats in the process, and hope that that is enough compensation for a pawn.
Yeah, absolutely. I agree. He needs to speed up and take a decision. I mean, I was just flicking ahead. I must admit, I haven't really seen this position before with the Black pieces. So I was kind of like, well, how is Black going to generate some play? And looking ahead at my database, the play gets wild. Okay. So, for instance, Black's most popular move.
Magnus there smiling in anticipation of that wildness about to happen, maybe.
And I just have to look at our... He's laughing really hard.
Has Artemiev frozen?
Yeah, that's what I'm wondering.
Has he disconnected?
Uh-oh.
OK, so we know that if the players have disconnected, they are given 30 seconds back. Well, they are given their time back if they connect within 30 seconds, reconnect within 30 seconds.
It does not look good on his camera. That looks like a very bad connection. Okay. Obviously, we do not know. OK, he's back, but we don't know if he's disconnected from the game. I mean...
Yeah, I think he will get his time back, most likely, because he has disconnected. And, I mean, look at the clock times. If he doesn't get his time back, that is going to be really difficult to fight back from.
Yeah, definitely. Gosh, 4 minutes.
Yeah.
4 minutes to 14.5 minutes. No, that's very strange.
Maybe a bit of
frozen again.
Maybe a bit of a glitch there because he had 7 minutes just a while ago. So, OK, we'll get to the bottom of this. It's a bit of a mystery, but either way, it's not looking great for Artemiev right now in terms of the first game today, losing that on the scoreboard, now down, but also maybe some connection issues. OK, maybe that will explain why he's been so slow in this opening stage. In what Jovanka mentioned is a known position. It has been seen before. OK.
Drama. Big drama.
Shall I show you some of the fireworks that Black has in store?
OK, let's keep an eye on the cameras as well while we show this, just in case Artemiev is able to reconnect, and we will try and keep you updated on that. Jovanka, you mentioned some chaos, some fireworks.
Yeah, OK. So the most popular move for Black here in this particular position is actually to develop the dark square... No, not the dark square bishop, but the knight. The knight, move it out to the f6 square. And, well, what does White do, David?
I don't know. Most likely, just bring the knight out as well.
You bring the knight out. OK, and Black even has the chance to just really accelerate the play and dive in with the knight into the centre of the board. Wow. If he wants to. I know.
That's surprising because normally you don't move the same piece twice in the opening, especially while the rest of your army are at home, just doing nothing, asleep. But there is a direct threat, right, Jovanka? The bishop coming out.
Exactly. And so that is why White has to take the time out to actually push a pawn and cover that square. And then, of course, play gets wild because Black starts to go, yay, let's attack. And so he attacks the knight in the edge of the board. And, of course, White really doesn't want to step backwards with the knight. So the game continues in a crazy style, and it's all about the counter-attack, so the White queen comes forward. And this is just crazy. OK, yeah. So much under... I mean, this is just impossible to evaluate. I know. It's simply the White... This is probably one of the milder lines there is. OK, so there's even crazier stuff than this with White's queen attacking the Black knight, but also the White knight under fire, and still neither side obeying those opening rules that we're taught when we're young to develop pieces. Yeah, so this could well happen in the position. So this is the position on the board right now. We're expecting Artemiev, once he sorts out his internet issues, to just bring his knight out. And, yeah, some craziness will ensue. Yeah, he keeps... so his camera, you know, sometimes he's back and then it lasts for a few seconds and then he's off again. So definitely
huge trouble with the internet connection now. Artemiev and all players are required to also have like a second internet source available, like a phone or something like that. But this is taking time. This is a little bit dramatic for the Russian. He was so eager to play the final against world champion Magnus Carlsen. This is not what he wants to be using his time doing. Fixing internet trouble. Talking about technology today. Sometimes.
That's what we need. Maybe just implant the Wi-Fi chip into our own arm or something so it will never fail. Yeah, either way, this is going to be frustrating for Magnus, especially in such a crazy position.
But I think it would be even more frustrating for Vladislav Artemiev. I mean, just Magnus can just sit back and just kind of go, well, I know I have the upper hand here. I can just calmly think about how I'm going to respond to Artemiev. Meanwhile, Artemiev is going to be the one in panic, going, connect, and probably slamming the mouse up and down. Why won't this thing work? We've all been there, and it's just very, very frustrating. Sometimes technology fails us. And when it comes to technology, that is our quiz of the day, where we're asking what new technology would help chess. And Matt Braddock says, I'd love to have a handheld chess game, but with stockfish built in. And I can tell you, it does exist because my phone regularly beats me. Does your phone beat you, David?
I'm not even brave enough to challenge it. Yeah, I think it would damage my ego too much to lose to my phone.
I've tried it in the most boring position in an opening. Oh, have we?
Okay, we do have some moves.
Okay, so we don't
Artemiev is back to 6 minutes on the clock here. Okay.
So, yeah, that was around the time he had, actually, before we saw his camera freeze. So, OK, he has been given his time back, Artemiev. We don't have him on the camera, unfortunately. But meanwhile, we have seen a couple of moves. White's knight has been kicked back from the side of the board. Black gave a check with his bishop, and Magnus has just blocked. So, yeah, sensible stuff by both sides again. We do see a trade of bishops now. Magnus, he did have a couple of minutes with which to calculate, so maybe that was the plus side for Magnus. He can react immediately to these black threats because he was given a bit more time while Artemiev was disconnected. So just think about the position, and now Artemiev has to bring his pieces out.
Yeah.
Does develop his knight.
His camera's still frozen, though. It feels shaky. I feel like, oh, maybe his internet could lose this connection anytime.
Yeah, and I have to say one thing about Artemiev's play. It's gone rogue. You know, he has left any form of opening theory, and he's now on his own. I don't know whether this is like serious opening preparation, or he's just kind of like jamming and just playing and seeing how far he can take this opening variation. So has been recently analysed, and White's tried 3 moves here to challenge the black pawn in the centre by picking up the e-pawn, moving it 1 square. Another move is just to develop the knight. Not sure about that one because it might fall foul to the black knight jumping into the centre. And then there's also just trying to develop the light square bishop by pushing the pawn, the g-pawn, 1 square forward.
Yeah, it definitely feels like both sides are freestyling here. Jovanka is such a rare line, as you mentioned, and even if someone's analysed it previously, I mean, it's hard to recall that type of thing. It's hard to kind of get a grip on this type of the type of ideas here because you can't just use pattern recognition. It's so concrete. One wrong slip with White, if White is unable to develop his pieces there on the right side, he's just going to get checkmated. The White king is going to be stuck as an easy target in the centre of the board. One slip by Black, you're already 1 pawn down. You could end up 2 pawns down and lacking compensation, lacking justification for those 2 pawn deficits. So, yeah, high stakes right now in this position. And Magnus just taking a bit of time out. He's got that luxury of 13 minutes on his clock, and he's just trying to calculate how to get that White king to safety. And he does this by pushing a pawn forward 2 squares. It looks like that pawn is just dropping. Black's knight can actually just take that pawn right now, but White light squared bishop has been opened up. So that White light squared bishop also has targets of its own. It is threatening one of the black pawns. And here, as Artemiev, I don't think you should take White's pawn in the centre. It feels like you're losing too much time. It feels like just get that black king to safety and ask White the question, what are you doing next? Yes, you've pushed a pawn, but your pieces are still sitting at home.
Yes, I agree with that completely. You know, this is such an enterprising opening that Artemiev has played. The spirit has been just to attack, to go forward, to put Magnus on the back foot. I don't think material considerations should even be thought about. Get the king to safety, throw another pawn into the mix, and it doesn't matter. It's all about who has the flow, who has the momentum. And I have to say, Magnus might be feeling quite uncomfortable here because, like you say, this is really offbeat stuff. And Magnus has this general rule, right? He's like, if my king is 2 moves away from... Well, let me start from the beginning. If the king is 1 move away from castling, safe. If my king is 2 moves away from castling, maybe safe. If it's 3 moves away from castling...
It's dangerous times.
Dangerous times.
Yeah, and I also remember having a chat with Magnus. This is 12 years ago. He was in the back of a taxi and we were just chatting about some opening variation, and he was saying, oh, this is too high stakes. 1 wrong slip and you get knocked out, you just lose. And he hates that type of position usually. But here, at least, White has something to cling on to. White does have this extra pawn, and if White can survive the next few moves, if White can get that White king castled, I think he's going to be in great shape. So, OK, Magnus, meanwhile, still waiting for a move to appear. He's now established an almost 10-minute lead on the clock.
Yeah,
it feels like Artemiev must be disconnected again because there's nothing to think about here. Just Black has to get that king to safety. Black has to castle away his king.
I agree. I think that's the most obvious move and logical move on the board. And
there's nothing else to think about, Jovanka.
Right.
It must be another disconnection, I think.
I know.
Such a shame if this game is decided by internet issues.
Although that would be very unfortunate. It's really not what you want. I've had a game decided because I had some lag and I ended up losing on time, and I was a pawn up. And it cost England, it was actually for the online Olympiad, and it cost my team the match, and I was really quite upset about that.
Oh, that must be horrible.
Yeah, I was material up as well. And then it was like, oh, what happened?
Well, I think anyone in the world can relate to this. I mean, having internet connection problems, even if you're just playing a game for fun, or if you're playing a game for a huge amount of money and honor.
We've been proved wrong, David, time and time again.
I called it wrong there. I thought that he must be disconnected because what was there to think about? Black's king has to run away to safety, but no, Artemiev just captures a pawn.
It seems to be Artemiev's style. Playing so explosive chess, we think it's internet connection.
Yes. Slow but explosive. And we did see White's bishop jump out with a check, attacking the Black king, so no time for Black to capture the White queen with his knight. And now this check has been blocked by Black. And the reason I was so surprised is because I felt that this would just help White. Now White, with this check, bringing his bishop out, he can even just trade a set of bishops right now. The White queen can even come forward. Lots of choices here for Magnus Carlsen. It feels like this is helping White because, Jovanka, using that logic you mentioned, White king now is only 2 moves away from getting to safety. All White needs to do after solving and resolving the issues with the queen and with the bishop is to move the knight and then castle. And he's safe. And he's going to be winning because White has an extra pawn.
What kind of moves actually appeal to you? So this is a really concrete position. White has to move the queen or either play bishop takes, bishop check. And what would you play, David?
First 2 things I'd look at. So checks and captures. You can play a check and a capture by playing bishop takes bishop right now. So White's bishop taking the Black bishop. Black's queen will likely recapture, and then you spend maybe 30 seconds there evaluating. It is a bit annoying because you have to deal with the threat against the White queen. So if I can't evaluate that, if I'm struggling to see the follow-up, then I go back and I think, OK, checks and captures. Next move I would look at is White's queen actually capturing the Black pawn in the centre of the board. And that would be a bit of a counterattack. So, yes, you're allowing the White bishop to drop, but you're also threatening the Black knight in the middle. And White would actually go 2 pawns up with that continuation. So that one as well, I would invest a bit of time. I'm trying to work it out now. It does look a bit risky. It does look a bit scary to bring the queen away. If those don't work, then I would look for threats or maybe just a way to defend both pieces at the same time, the White queen and bishop. Maybe I could bring her to the side to defend the bishop, so the White queen could go to the b4 square. The reason I'm attracted to that as well, you stop Black from castling. So those are the 3 options I would consider right now for Carlsen. And clearly, it's hard to decide between them. That's why he's spending a couple of minutes now. And, yeah, this type of position, it is pretty wild. It's likely not even to get into an endgame. And Artemiev, with 3 minutes on the clock, it's going to be hard for him to keep navigating, keep making these really difficult decisions. For Magnus, with 11 minutes, it's much, much more pleasant. That's why he's just sitting on his hands, relaxing. He looks pretty chilled, Magnus. And he knows that if he's accurate, he should be OK with White.
Even win?
He would love to.
I don't know.
He's got decent chances, I think. It all depends on whether White's king can get away to safety on that right side and castle.
Okay. The more I look at this position, the more I'm thinking it's not clear. And I think the reason Magnus is looking so relaxed is because he's in calculation mode. I agree with you. The first move to look at is bishop takes bishop check, because it's a check and we have that rule.
Forcing move.
It's a forcing move. And so if we kind of say, OK, that's the first one we're going to look at, bishop. OK, he does make this queen move that we also thought was quite safe. And I like this move. Again, because it prevented black from castling to kingside. But
maybe I called it wrong.
No, one thing that did worry me is that it does allow black to start attacking the queen.
OK, but another option that I've noticed, OK, he brings his knight in, attacking that white bishop, that black knight also on an outpost, anchored by a pawn, protected by a pawn, and white has to make a big decision with his bishop. Another option I spotted, Jovanka, was black's queen could have also come out, started attacking, started to create some really scary threats. So Artemiev, he didn't have that much time, only 3 minutes, and it's hard to just kind of find your way through all these muddy waters. But
this move, David,
do you like it?
I love it.
For black?
I absolutely, I think it's the best move there is, because now you can even step forward with your queen and there is a killer threat in the air. The queen is going to move itself on the open line, give the white king a check. And
the question is, though, Jovanka, is that a killer? White's king will just sidestep. OK, white will lose the right to castle, but black also lacks the right to castle right now, because if you look at the white, there we go, white's king does sidestep, and white is actually ready to bring the rook into the centre and check the black king. And I should mention, black's king cannot do the same and run away. It cannot castle because white's queen, with a bit of X-ray vision, is cutting the black king off. You cannot castle through check. So white's queen doing a great job of keeping that black king fixed in the centre. And, OK, black now bringing his knight out, white giving a check. This is going to be wild with both kings unable to castle.
But OK,
black's king in the centre.
In the centre of the board. This is the craziest position I think we've seen on the Champions Chess Tour so far.
Wow.
I mean, just look at it. I mean, no side has a safe king. And goodness me.
Yeah, whose king is weaker? That's the question. And also, if you talk to white's rook in the bottom right corner, how is that rook ever going to get out now? If you talk to black's rooks, they're disconnected. Black's king in the centre, I mean, literally so open.
That's not just the problem. The problem is that white's queen is under attack, and also there's a pawn up for grabs, the A2 pawn.
Yeah.
But is it a plan from, OK, of course, protect the queen and keep her on there, but can't she just move the knight out and castle and get the rook out?
No more castling.
No more castling. The king's moved.
Ah, of course.
So maybe what white has to try later on in the game is to push Harry the H-pawn up the board, push the pawn in front of that white rook on the corner, and then lift the rook up the board this time rather than across. Maybe that's the quickest way, the quickest route in for that rook. But, OK, Stockfish, the computer, says that Magnus has only one move to not find himself at a big disadvantage.
That presumably must be to give check, because otherwise you step the queen back to some non-forcing square, then
you give black a move. You give
black a time, and maybe the second row might be it's found it.
Yeah, it was quite an obvious move, but now it's the follow-up that might be difficult. And OK, the black queen has sidestepped, challenging the white queen, and now big decision from Magnus Carlsen. Do you trade and go into an endgame or not? And Magnus says no, but Stockfish, the computer, said he had to pretty much. OK, actually, his move's all right. It's not the best, but it's OK. And that is a stylistic thing. He thinks that an endgame will suit Artemiev. We showed earlier in the day how strong Artemiev is in endgame, so Magnus keeping the queens on. But anything could happen. Both kings are just horribly misplaced.
Right. I mean, for me, the most natural move on this board is just to go rook takes pawn. Greed is good. Get the rook to the second line, and we'll see what happens next.
Yeah, so black's rook on that A-line can go and go greedy.
Yeah.
Yeah, looks very natural. I guess white's knight will move, and maybe Artemiev just trying to calculate the follow-up. That looks like step one.
But he's got no time. He's got 2 minutes on the clock. This is an insanely sharp position. He has to start being a little bit practical, not necessarily finding the best moves, but good enough.
Yeah, and maybe that, again, that's another reason why Magnus kept the queens on. He's very aware of the clock. And if you're attacking your opponent's king when they're down to 30 seconds, we've seen what happens in the first game. That led to disaster for Artemiev. OK, he has to move.
Yeah.
Let's hope it's not a disconnection again. He has to move. That black rook can take a pawn. That black rook can even come down to the 5th rank and attack the white queen. OK, it does capture a pawn. And as Jovanka mentioned, that was the first instinct. You see a pawn, you take a pawn. And he could have played that instantly without thinking. It feels like he's not really trusting his instincts right now, Artemiev.
Yeah. And, OK, you mentioned that white was simply going to move the knight. Now, what I would do, just according to principles, is obviously I want to hunt the white king. The white king is not looking very safe, but it has one important defender, that is the rook. If I could get rid of the rook by offering a trade, this is my idea, then I'm going to start. Then black will start to harass. Oh.
Yeah, Stockfish says there's only one move that doesn't lose on the spot for white. So Magnus now thinking, he still looks pretty relaxed, Magnus Carlsen, but the stakes have increased. It is already do or die time, and he has to move that knight next to the black rook. It's under fire. He has to blockade black's central pawn. Any other square for that knight, he will lose. Any other move that doesn't defend that knight, he will lose. And, OK, Magnus... usually,
but is it a natural move?
Yes. I would say it's the most natural move, but... there are maybe a couple of options you could consider as well. It's not 100% guarantee that he'll find it. But normally when the top players, when the kind of path is narrowed, when the margin for error is tiny, they are quite accurate. But in this type of crazy positions, especially with the two kings, not on squares that you usually see them, it's hard to use pattern recognition. It's hard to just purely calculate your way out of danger. So, OK, blunder time or survival time? That is the question for Magnus.
What a strange position.
And this is what Aronian actually in his interview said Artemiev had to do. You have to get Magnus on the back foot early. You have to attack him. Artemiev would love to get this position, but with 10 minutes on the clock, then I would say black is a big favourite. The evaluation bar slightly on black's side, but right now it's still 50-50. Anything can happen. And if the white knight does find its best square, that D3 square, as we see there, according to Stockfish, then it's black's turn. If black isn't accurate, maybe things will turn around in white's favour.
Funnily enough, it's like
he finds the best move.
Stockfish's suggestions were actually just giving a knight away. I mean, that's OK, but best move has been played. And this was the idea that I had. You know, white's king is being protected by just one valuable piece, the rook. Why not trade it off? And Magnus... he's predicted this turn of events, and now he's developed his knight. Knight is a king's best friend, we've been told many, many times by David, and it's kind of been proved to be 95% true.
Yep, and that's why white has established two strong knights to defend the white king. The one thing I'm worried about from Magnus's point of view is his rook still in the corner. That white rook on the H1 square, it's going to take an age to develop. How
many moves are we talking? What could be a plan for Magnus to get that rook out of there?
Run with your king.
I don't think he'll have time for that, Jovanka. I think he'll have to push the pawn in front of his rook and just bring it up the board, and that might take 2 or 3 moves.
OK.
But OK, meanwhile, Artemiev won't give him that time.
No, he is certainly turning the screws because the queen is now under attack. And now Magnus has to decide what to do with the queen. Where can she retreat to? I mean, there's only one square.
Yep, only one safe square. So Magnus has 2 options. He can trade a set of rooks first with check, but no, he slides the queen back to its only safe square. Now we do see the rook trade from Artemiev, and Magnus has to capture that rook with a knight. There's no way the king should step back to the centre where it's really vulnerable along diagonals and open lines. OK, one of the white knights steps back. I'm slightly surprised it was this knight, but OK, Magnus just coordinating the 2 white knights. They are going to act as the bodyguards. They're going to be the blockaders. It's not going to be easy for black to break through the combined might of those 2 knights.
And he's under the minute now, Artemiev, on the clock, in a crazy position on the board in the second game here. Can he win it?
He definitely can, but he's going to need a bit of luck, a bit of accuracy, and he needs some really creative ideas, because despite the fact the evaluation bar really likes black, there's no immediate breakthrough, and you could definitely envisage a situation where he panics due to the clock situation, and suddenly white is given time to activate the white rook, and suddenly trends change, and white will be the one in control. First, he brings his queen across. That queen's on a decent square, but I don't see the direct threat behind this move.
There's no direct threat. I think it's just designed to stop the white king from trying to escape away into the edge of the board.
Yes, quite possibly. So now I would be very tempted as Magnus to push that h-pawn in front of the white rook forward, just try and secure a way out, an escape route for that rook. OK, what else?
What else to do? I like your suggestion. It's great.
I mean, yeah, it's just process of elimination. I don't see anything else that's tempting. You definitely don't want to move the white knights. They are in their perfect kind of defensive formation. And the white queen, lacking squares. She's only got one safe square to go to, and that's why Magnus decides
to get the rook out eventually.
To get the rook out, yes.
Yeah, and you're finding all the great defensive moves, David. OK, so now how can Artemiev just amp up the pressure?
Yeah, OK.
Steps forward with the queen.
He loves his endgames. That's one thing we've learned about Mr. Vladislav. And, OK, the queen trade, it has been allowed by Magnus. I think he pretty much had to do this. He had to get his rook into the game. That was the #1 priority.
Okay.
We will see the queens leave the board. Black's going to go after white's pawn now. White's remaining pawn on that left side. Black does have a pretty scary passed pawn as well in the centre of the board. Can he creep that pawn somehow past the power of the white knights? Those white knights, yeah, they are guardians of that pawn, of the black central pawn.
And is white's pawn the one standing all by itself on the c4 square? Is that one vulnerable? I mean, is there a big chance that that's going to drop off?
Certainly vulnerable.
Because the first move that I'm thinking is attack it. And
he does.
And he does. Oh, hang on a second.
White can
Is it
actually...
knight takes pawn now?
Yeah, OK, Artemiev, maybe he's missed this last move. I wish I could see his facial reaction now, because white's knight gave itself up, but the white rook, we mentioned it wasn't doing anything. Suddenly there was an attack against the black knight on this third row. That's why black couldn't capture the white knight in the centre, and now those two pawns have been traded, eliminated, and suddenly a draw is the most likely result because there only exist pawns on the same side on the board now.
You say maybe a draw. I suspect that there's some danger, especially with Magnus's last move, because, OK, you're attacking a pawn, and if you step forward with that pawn that's under attack, the g7 pawn, attack the knight, then white does have a rather crafty check.
OK.
And
brought his knight in. This looks...
OK, this also looks good.
Yeah, this must have been the plan. Suddenly, black's rook is under fire, and I think we've seen a blunder from Artemiev, simply because what are you going to do with this rook? The black rook is stuck defending its knight. If you move the black rook away, your knight drops. If you move the black rook up the board one square, then the white knight jumps in. OK, Artemiev resigns.
No.
Or has he lost on time? Maybe.
No, he's lost on the board, David, because he can't do anything with the rook.
Yeah, but has he resigned? His time ran out as well, Jovanka. So either way, disaster for Artemiev. I said it would be a draw, but just one moment where he didn't have enough time and it's over.
And there he logs on, Vladislav Artemiev. Look at his face. He is, he usually has the same face, but this must be devastating to Vladislav Artemiev, losing now the second game here in dramatic fashion. David, what happened here?
I think it was just the clock. It was the clock, it was panic, it was a lot of things, but Artemiev, he wasn't able to keep up with Magnus's tricks, and just in the endgame, that's where Magnus worked his magic and tricked Artemiev. Actually, if we see this position, we were banking on a draw here. We thought queens come off. Artemiev, he loves the endgame. He's going to be out of danger. But in this position, after black's rook stepped forward, Magnus started the tricks. He brought his knight forward and sacrificed it in the centre, opening up an attack, a discovered threat against the black knight. Artemiev rightly just captured this pawn, defending both of the knights with his rook. But after white's knight jumped forward, this is where he blundered. He self-destructed. It was because of the clock, I think. And here he pushed a pawn forward. He had to just let this pawn go and trying to whip up some counterplay, try and coordinate the black pieces better. But after this pawn stepped forward, and the knight leaped in, Artemiev realised it was dead lost. His rook is under fire, and this rook also, remember, needs to protect its knight. And if the rook steps back to the only square where it can defend the knight, then suddenly, whoops, a knight check, a knight fork as well, a double attack, and black's rook falls. Artemiev losing on the board and the clock in this game.
Big drama in the final of the Aimchess US Rapid, Artemiev, he has to win the next game to have chances of tying the first match in the final. He's gonna have the white pieces in about 14 minutes.
I'm ahead of the game.
Well, the phone is always ringing, I'm caught up on the line. Got a string around my finger, remember who am I? I'm a boss and I'm honestly off my rocker, but follow me, I'm ahead of the game. I'm ahead of the game. I'm only ever slinging, I'm working overtime. Got a song and I'm the singer, the melody, the vibe. I'm a prodigy, logically, I'm impossibly wanted, but they'll remember my name. They'll remember my name. Ooh, well, I'm ahead now. I'm ahead of the game. I'm ahead of the game. Ooh, well, I'm ahead now. I'm ahead of the game. I'm ahead of the game. Well, I'm ahead now. Well, I'm ahead now. I'm ahead of the game. I'm ahead of the game.
Aimchess, well, definitely providing us with the drama in the Aimchess US Rapid in the final here. Magnus is now up by 2 points. And Magnus, he is a super keen online chess player. He plays hundreds, thousands of games. And we did David analyzed Artemiev's online performance in 2021. It was about 40 hours of chess so far for Artemiev. And now it's time to look at Magnus Carlsen.
That's right. And Magnus, as expected, he is a chess lover, and he's played a lot more than Artemiev online this year.
Oh, wow.
This is on Lichess again, Magnus's named account, and it's 67 hours. That's a lot of chess. Also, check it out. It's mostly bullet chess. That means 1 minute, where it's all about speed, all about the mouse skills. And here we see Magnus, out of 97,000 moves that he's played online this year so far, 55,000 of them have come with pawns. Playing with the knight quite a lot as well. Then we see some stats for the other pieces. Not so much with the queen, meaning that Magnus loves his endgames. He loves to trade off those queens. We see that he played once 119 games in a day. That is a marathon. 119 games, also 900 games in a whole month. That's more than some players play in a whole year. And
wow.
Okay, again, another reason to check out Aimchess. You can see some of the flashiest games from the top players throughout this year. Magnus here winning in 15 moves with a really pretty checkmate, trapping the black king.
But not against the strongest player, though.
That's right.
So, I mean, I love this. So this shows that Magnus, he plays any level.
Yeah. You can challenge all the top players. You can play Banterblitz against them, for example, and Magnus takes on all these challenges.
Very cool.
He doesn't discriminate. He plays them all.
And he's equally ruthless.
And he's equally ruthless, that's right. And here we see his bullet rating. He's actually been the #1 on several chess platforms for years. In bullet chess, in blitz chess, here his rating 3,100, almost 3,200. That is out of this world. That's how strong he is at bullet chess. And again, actually his most frequent opponent this year, it's Alireza Firouzja. Playing him how many times here? 378 games.
Oh, wow.
In 8 months so far this year. That is a lot of sparring. That is a lot of games. And okay, here we see Magnus's most successful opening. Surprise, surprise, it's the same as Artemiev's most successful opening that we saw a bit earlier today, the modern defense, as we see. And we can study this in more detail if we want. We can also check out some of Magnus's stats, scoring 86% wins in the modern. Also, Jovanka, check it out, the Caro-Kann defense.
Look at that, 70% with the Caro-Kann.
Well, does this reflect Magnus's opening choices? I know he's a universal player. And when he plays these top tournaments?
Maybe a little bit. He's played the Caro-Kann, I think, in this tournament, but in general, I think these are the type of openings maybe he saves a special repertoire for bullet chess when it's purely about speed and maybe trying to beat the lower rated players rather than necessarily about staying solid. And okay, win rate very high as expected from Magnus Carlsen, mostly winning from his opponents resigning, just breaking their resistance. Check this out, though. This is actually quite relevant, especially from this last game we just saw with Artemiev. No castling, neither side castled in that game, and Magnus wins 66% of those.
Wow.
And that stat clearly going up after his last win against Artemiev. Artemiev, we saw actually earlier today, struggling when neither side castled. Magnus maybe checking out his opponent's weaknesses, and 30 games in a row by Magnus Carlsen. That's his longest win streak, I think, as well. Many of those opponents were Grandmasters.
Wow. Magnus Carlsen, he is a super keen online player. Obviously, he's also the world champion in both classical, rapid, and blitz chess, and he is in the overall lead in the Meltwater Champions Chess Tour. But his Aimchess stats, they are surprisingly bad compared to the other players, and now it's moment of truth for Magnus Carlsen. What's the first reaction when you see your numbers?
Yeah, I think it pretty much reflects what I've been thinking, that advantage capitalization, that's what I'm looking at, and that's been really, really bad. So that's and also my resourcefulness has been horrible. So this reflects what's been my problem, is that I play fairly well for a while, but then I don't win enough of the games where I'm better, and I don't save enough of the games that I'm worse, which just means that I've not been practical enough. So that's this reflects that I have a lot of things to work on. It also reflects that Wesley's been playing really, really well.
Yeah. Is it annoying to see Wesley's numbers here?
No, I wouldn't say it's annoying. It's pretty reflective of the fact that he generally has played really, really, really well, and it's been hard for me to beat him.
So are there any of the numbers on you that you are happy about?
No, the games analyzed number is pretty good.
But is it, so you are actually aware of numbers like this? Do you use it at all in your chess training to actually figure out what you need to work on?
I would say that I can feel these things quite intuitively, but it's obviously helpful to have some more concrete numbers on it as well. But this very much reflects the trend that I've felt in, frankly, this whole season of the tour.
Ladislav Artemiev, he has taken the Meltwater Champions Chess Tour by storm. This is only his third tournament and his second final, so no surprise, his Aimchess stats must be quite good. And now it is moment of truth for Ladislav Artemiev.
Yes, it's very interesting.
If you look at the different categories, for example, time management, you have a bit lower score percentage than some other players, but you also have a good endgame. So how do you explain you always have you have low on time, but you play well in the endgame? How do you explain this combination?
I think that it's very individual, because every player has his style. Example, we have some players who like play very aggressive, and alternative, we have players with accurate style who like technical positions and have very positional style. About me, maybe endgames very comfortable for me, and I am always ready to play endgame usually. And of course, yes, also sometimes I have problems with time. It's very interesting statistic.
No doubt Artemiev sometimes struggles on time. This is the head-to-head Aimchess stats, David, and what are we seeing?
So, strong numbers for both players, but the biggest areas of difference, it's time management. That's all in Magnus Carlsen's favour. However, endgames in Artemiev's favour. That's where the two players will be looking to bank the points.
In the opening, though, they are both perfect. And if you want to become better at the openings, you should pay attention now, because Mr. David Howell will give us some opening tricks.
Opening traps happen all over the place. This is why you have to practice your openings and you have to study your openings to avoid falling into any traps. I myself have fallen into plenty of traps in my career, including when I was young, and I'm going to show you one of the most popular traps, one of the most famous traps in the Queen's Gambit opening. The Queen's Gambit starts with both sides pushing forward their Queen's pawn on the first turn. The reason it's called the Queen's Gambit is because White now sacrifices a pawn, trying to distract the Black pawn from the center of the board. And if Black accepts this gambit, if Black captures this pawn, it is temporarily an extra pawn for Black. White, meanwhile, can just push a pawn forward, trying to open up his bishop to target the pawn that has just captured his Black's extra pawn. And if Black is greedy, if Black wants to keep the extra pawn, he can keep this pawn guarded now. However, this does lead to an opening trap potentially, and if Black isn't careful, then he will soon have a lost position. White now can push a pawn forward, trying to undermine Black's pawn chain here. If Black moves this pawn, if he pushes it forward, then White simply regains the pawn that he gambited, and White has a very healthy position. 2 central pawns against Black's 1, and White has developed his bishop very nicely. Therefore, if Black plays the most logical move, keeping the pawn chain by pushing another pawn forward, this falls into one of the most famous traps in chess. White will trade these pawns off the board, and now it looks like Black has a very healthy position, a very safe position, but suddenly we see that there's one undefended piece in his camp. White can bring the queen out along this diagonal, and suddenly this rook in the corner is trapped. There's no way to defend it, there's no way to block this attack without giving up material, and White will win at least a piece due to this attack against the rook. This is why we have to study our openings, and you have to always look for your opponent's threats at an early stage. If not, you'll fall into these traps. Let's go through those moves one more time. So we start with the Queen's Gambit opening, White sacrificing a pawn. If Black gets greedy and captures this pawn, then White can simply push a pawn forward, trying to open up his bishop to regain the sacrificed pawn. If Black continues to be greedy, defending this pawn, now we see a huge error potentially from Black. If Black tries to keep his pawns intact, then after this trade, after pawn takes pawn, the pawn recaptures, suddenly White can take advantage of a weakness in Black's camp. White can bring his queen out. Suddenly, this rook in the corner is attacked along this diagonal. There's no way to defend this rook. There's no way to defend or block this attack, and therefore White is winning already.
Learning from David Howell, and let's see if Vladislav Artemiev has some opening traps for Magnus Carlsen. He will have to win this next game to be able to tie the first match in the big final. He will have the white pieces. Artemiev, a draw or a win for Magnus Carlsen, and the first day in the final is actually over. Magnus will be the winner. So what should we expect from Artemiev in this must-win situation?
Yeah, well, this do-or-die moment, isn't it? He has nothing to lose, and that should make him dangerous. I think he just has to do what he did in the second game, which almost worked. He needs to play in a critical fashion. He needs to put Magnus Carlsen under pressure, and then just see what happens next. It's now about just playing for pleasure.
Yeah, he's tried 2 different strategies. The first one, just maybe slower and more steady. That didn't work. Yeah, in the last game, he played more fiery chess. That nearly worked, but it was all because of the clock time that he was punished. And Artemiev, no matter which strategy he chooses now, he just has to play quickly. He knows that. Hopefully as well, his internet will hold up.
Yeah.
But either way, Artemiev, he needs to play quick moves. He has to put the world champion in a position he hasn't felt in before, and yeah, just get that world champion out of his comfort zone.
Artemiev must be feeling the pressure now. Must-win situation. But we talked about it before, maybe a little bit of freedom as well. He just has to win this game, and here we go.
Yeah, and it's a flexible opening. The Reti opening, bringing the knight out on the first go. Okay, Magnus replies with this pawn push. So will we see Artemiev push a pawn himself? White can push how many pawns here? 5, 6 different pawns that are still well known in this type of position. Okay, another choice from Artemiev, but he's slowed down again, not playing instantly, not picking his openings before the games have started. It is risky. He's known for freestyling, Artemiev. He's known for just kind of choosing an opening and shifting that emphasis to the middle game, but against Magnus, it's hard to do that. You need to target him early. You need to get out of the opening in a really strong position. That's how Wesley So's defeated Magnus in the past. That's how Aronian's done it, but no. So far, it's a repetition of the first game today. Both players now just copying each other. White pushing a pawn. Looks pretty innocent. White has got ready, however, to bring his bishop to its longest diagonal. That's a fianchetto. Magnus replying by bringing his knight out. And, OK, I expect to see black challenge in the centre quite soon, with a pawn maybe. White there, just continuing his plan. White is ready to castle, and there we go. Magnus does indeed counter in the centre. A quick pawn trade. And it's up to Artemiev how to imbalance this one.
And the knight develops to challenge the knight in the centre. And now the most popular move is for black to pick up the knight that's in the centre and move it to the c7 square.
So just drop back.
Exactly. It looks a little bit odd, but the reason he does it is just to preserve and potentially also step forward with his king's pawn 2 squares.
Mm-hmm. Yep, that's a very common move. We've seen that actually before in the tour, played by the likes of Levon Aronian, I think. No, sorry, by Nepomniachtchi against Levon Aronian. Black's knight dropping back there, so top players have played it before. Another, maybe the most solid move in this position is to just trade off White's knight. OK, Magnus, however, pushes a pawn. This is also very well known. This is very solid. Getting ready to bring his bishop out to its longest diagonal. And Artemiev, he has shown he wants to win this game. He needs to win this game. And he's pushed forward this pawn. He's trying to wrench open this H line. He's using that pawn as a battering ram, trying to just soften up black's structure. Now that Magnus has signalled what his plans are to bring out the black bishop and then castle the king, Artemiev's going on the attack, preempting some potential play on that side.
And this pawn move is actually a particular favourite of Ding Liren, and also Vacher Legrave has played it twice, as well as Levon Aronian against Vishwanathan Anand. Black's main response is actually just to act cool, pretend nothing's happened, and just develop dark square bishop.
Yep, this is still, again, well-known stuff, but I'm slightly surprised to see Magnus Carlsen allow it, especially in a situation where black, as black, he's happy with the draw. It's not the most solid. There were other more solid options on the last turn. Now, at least, he's giving something for White to get excited about. Mm-hmm. White can get excited about this pawn push, opening up the rook.
I just checked my database and I spot a name that I'm familiar with, and I see David Howell has played this exact response with the black pieces. You played it against Emilio Cordova in 2007.
Yes.
Incredible, the experts we have here.
17, yes, sorry.
It's just incredible that we have this expertise in the studio.
I know.
Not only are you very good at chess, you actually played all of these games.
I must admit, I'm waiting for the day when the players follow a game that I've played. I've seen lots of David's, but none of mine yet.
It's coming. It's coming.
I know. Just one Caracal.
Yeah, I've been around the block a few times. I've played every opening under the sun at some point in my career. Some successfully, some not successfully. Mm-hmm. And I know that this move that I played, that Magnus has just pushed, pushing this pawn. Yes, I drew that game, but I was in big trouble as black. So I don't have very fond memories from the black side of this position.
Mm-hmm. So when studying the opening and all these openings that you can choose and all the moves you can choose, do you actually, like, every move you study thoroughly and for maybe hours and, I don't know, days?
Sometimes.
Yeah?
Sometimes I know I should study for longer, but I just play through a few quick games. I think, OK, for example, Magnus has played this before. Click, 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 click. I know that game off by heart. And then you get to the board and you realise, oh, I really don't know it that well. It's like, do I move the bishop first or the knight first? I can't remember.
My problem is that I can always remember who played the game. I just can't remember what they played.
You can see the face, but not the board.
So this is why I have lots of notebooks with me, and I try to jot down several stories or several kind of points that I should remember. And in fact, this is why I find Chessable so good, because not only does it force me to repeat these variations many, many times, in order to remember them, I have to find some kind of something to force me to keep making the right move. Otherwise, I'll be playing the wrong move all the time.
And
Magnus laughing away. And
maybe he remembers how badly I played this position back in 2017.
Maybe, or...
Did you lose it?
No, I drew, but I was in big trouble.
OK. Yeah, Magnus, those laughters, I always wonder what it's about. And whenever we ask him, he always say, oh, I don't remember.
He's a man of mystery.
Yeah. And whilst Artemiev is thinking about his response, we are asking for our quiz of the day, what new technology would help chess? And Santiago Olgore, Yeah, says, just a nice camera and a little light for Artemiev and Aronian would be an enjoyable technological improvement.
Yes. Gotta agree with that.
And Vodo Mama Juju says, I think big data can truly change the game of chess. It is technology that deals with huge volumes of variety of data. It will help players to analyze the games easily with efficient statistics available and also help in pattern recognition.
Yeah.
And I do happen to know that chess players, because we sift through so many games and we kind of really expert at kind of picking out the most valuable moments, we are very, very good at big data. And companies are interested in chess players for this reason. Okay, so white does castle the king and Magnus develops his dark square bishop. And Shathan Badar says, a new app with, if you can listen to the pieces, talks back to you and gives you their feelings on the board during the game. I like that one. You just have in your ear the knights just going, what are you doing?
That would be a lot of fun.
I want to get in the game.
Yeah.
And you're like, OK, I'll try to get you in there.
Well, maybe if you make it more into an e-sport online chess, you could actually maybe have the pieces talking.
Yeah, I like it. I mean, it was actually... J.K. Rowling who came up with this idea when she came up with wizard chess, because there, the pieces are pretty active and they're talking back and they're refusing to move. No, they don't want to do that. And I just love that concept. Yeah. And if you two want to enter our quiz of the day, then you can do so by tweeting us using 3 hashtags. Remember, you have to use all 3. Chess Champs, Opera, Aimchess, US Rapid. And there you can see there is an amazing prize up for grabs. Chessable course, a 1-year Play Magnus Plus membership and 1-year Chess24 Premium membership. And Artemiev steps forward with his Queen's Pawn. And to all intents and purposes, it looks like he's offered Magnus the chance to win a pawn. So, David, will Magnus say yes, please?
I think he'll say no thank you to this offer of a pawn. And we should check this out because Artemiev, he needs to take risks in order to win, as we know. And here, with this last pawn push, he has lessened the defence of this knight. It's only defended once now, by only 1 pawn. Previously, it was defended twice. And if black takes this knight, we might see a trade. And now the black bishop can leap forward and take a pawn. But check this out. Artemiev will just sidestep with his rook, getting his rook to a very strong open line. Also, suddenly this black bishop is misplaced. It's too far forward. It has no backup. It needs to retreat. The black king cannot actually even castle right now, because if black castles, then suddenly the black bishop does, its absence does, it is felt simply. And here white can take a pawn. Suddenly, look at the black king. It's just too open. And so Magnus, I don't think he'll be tempted to go for this here. Instead of taking the bait, instead of taking this pawn, I think he needs to develop. Either black needs to castle the king away to safety, or I would recommend bringing the bishop just to solidify your centralized knight, just to control all the squares and say to Artemiev, OK, you're tempting me. I'm not getting tempted. I'm just in charge here. And I do like black's position because it's actually hard to break through for white. There's no pawn breaks. That's the main thing. How is white going to ever challenge the black king once it castles? I don't see it, and he does bring his bishop to the centre. And again, this threat, it exists over the next few turns. Magnus, at some point, if you leave that knight there, he will get greedy. But I think Artemiev will take a timeout and just defend this piece. Yeah. Okay, he's done it.
And lo and behold, if Magnus castles, then he's actually transposed into your game, David. And you actually said that you had a really bad position.
Yeah.
You were lucky to survive. Was it because of the opening, or was it because of some decision?
It was about 3 or 4 moves down the line that I think I made a big committal blunder. Well, a bit of a strategic blunder more than a materialistic blunder. I didn't lose material, but I allowed my opponent's pieces to get active unnecessarily. And meanwhile, Magnus, talking of allowing opponent's pieces to get active, he has said, OK, I'm just protecting everything first. Before committing the black king, he's just created a really nice pawn chain on this left side of the board, okay, keeping everything under control. So if white was tempted to go and attack some of the black pawns, Magnus has already defended them, so he won't have to lose time there. And that has reduced Artemiev to just pawn pushes, innocent pawn pushes. That is not necessarily threatening anything yet. So now is the time for Magnus to castle that king. We saw his stats as well. Aimchess stats, He does well when he doesn't castle, but this is the type of position where you should definitely castle.
Yeah, most definitely. And what about Artemiev's sneaky pawn move there? Does it have any hidden purpose? Because it does look a little bit obscure.
Yeah, I think his idea is a bit of a slow one. At some point, after a trade of knights in the centre, White's rook as well in the corner might want to move. Then White will get ready to push some pawns on this left flank. But I don't think he's ready yet. Magnus just bringing his rook across. Again, keeping everything in his camp defended. Black's knight on the c6 square was the only loose piece, lacking a defender. So Magnus has brought his rook across, and I like it. I still think he really should castle, but Magnus, he knows that he's only one move away, and that was your rule, right, Jovanka? If you're one move away from castling, you're fine. You can improve other pieces first. It's all about timing, all about prioritising.
Yeah, it wasn't quite my rule. It was Magnus's rule.
The rule you're quoting to us, yes.
Well, let's be reminded about those Aimchess stats between these two. We do know that time management for Vladislav Artemiev is bad, and it's gotten him in huge trouble so far in this final. Better in this game, though, and then it is that endgame that he, I guess, again, will be hoping for at some point.
Yep, he would love an endgame, maybe a more simple endgame than the one he achieved in the last game, where he just had no time and couldn't work out the details. But notice Magnus Carlsen's strategy. All of the pieces are still on the board. Even if a set of knights get traded in the centre, how is Artemiev ever going to trade off the queens when it's so blocked? It's just impossible. So Magnus picking his openings, picking his middle game formations in order to avoid endgames. That, to me, is a clear indicator that Magnus has studied his opponent's games, and he has planned with his coaches maybe certain types of techniques in order to ensure Artemiev can't get to his strongest point of the game.
Yeah. And Artemiev obviously thinking about how to come up with a plan. I mean, there's nothing obvious.
Yeah.
I mean, one of the moves that kind of immediately sprung to my mind was, first of all, just moving the rook 2 squares towards the centre, putting it on a half-open line. Another move I thought about was, hey, Magnus should castle. Maybe I can stop him from castling by sliding the queen to the left. OK, the rook now has relocated itself. But I was just going to say that White has to be careful about playing such kind of like one-sided moves, because Artemiev's sneaky pawn move actually had some consequences, and that is that the b3 square is now up for grabs.
Yeah.
OK, finally, Magnus castles.
Yeah, I think White's play is quite one-dimensional here. As you mentioned, Jovanka, White only has one side that he can play on. I don't see how these pawn pushes... Earlier, we got excited, right, when that H-pawn for White on the right side pushed forward. I don't see what he's done with that. He decided to castle his king on that flank, and therefore now, because there's no headway to be made, no progress to be made in the centre or on that right flank, Artemiev has had to switch, and all of his energy is focused on the left side. But Carlsen now, after this trade of knights and after White's pawns pushed, he's saying, OK, I know you're trying to undermine that nice black pawn chain on the left, but I'm going to ignore it for now. More importantly, I'm going to try and trade off pieces. A draw suits Magnus, remember. So now everything's coming off, actually. All of the knights are leaving the board. Black has also traded off these bishops. Artemiev, will he just recapture this bishop with his king? Maybe the white knight in the centre of the board, maybe it's about to drop off anyway. You can throw it into the centre, give it up in a different way, and then capture Black's bishop. But
yes, I think this is a good choice, because, you know, remember, Artemiev has to win. It's not enough to draw. He just has to throw caution to the wind and try to extract something from the position. And I'm just worried that if he just steps forward and takes the bishop, that the structure that Magnus has is a little bit too solid.
Yeah. So if he just takes this bishop, Magnus will recapture the knight, and, like you said, solid, not many pieces left. These rooks just neutralise each other. It's just equal. It's just going to be a draw maximum, I think, here for White. So I think he has to just mix things up. He has to gamble slightly, and after the black bishop takes this bishop, not recapture automatically, but instead sacrifice this knight, which is dropping off anyway, but in a favourable manner, and he can do that by bringing his knight forward, giving his knight up on an empty square, attacking the black queen, attacking this rook, and if black takes, now to take the white light square bishop, and suddenly, look at these guys, they are eternally weak. They're doubled, no protection for them. Also, the black king slightly more open than it was. White's queen later on can try and target these pawns. This is his best bet. It's still nothing special, but, OK, he's tried it. Look at this. The white knight has given itself up on this empty square. And now, is Magnus going to take it? No.
Magnus says no. OK, but he puts his queen on that square, which is a little bit strange to me, because now Artemiev can play knight takes.
Magnus is going on the attack, Ivanka.
We have to highlight, actually, why he couldn't play knight takes rook.
Yeah, so if White had played knight takes rook, the black queen would have swooped down and delivered a nasty checkmate to the white king. This was a hidden resource. This is why the top players are so sneaky. They see stuff like this, which, I mean, it was hidden from afar, right, Ivanka? So after the knight jump, the black queen stepping forward, it was just impossible to move this knight out of the way. If you move it out of the way, the black queen jumps in. So we did see a trade, and a trade of a few more pieces, a few more pawns as well coming off the board, a trade of rooks on this square. And after all of this, it's just level material, level pawns. The only thing that Artemiev can hope for is that we're heading towards an endgame, and also black does have an isolated pawn. Everything else is pretty much balanced.
Yeah.
It's all about this pawn right now. If Magnus can later trade it off, easy draw.
Yes.
If Artemiev can round it up, for example, bringing the queen to target this pawn, maybe some small winning chances.
Yeah.
But nothing too huge. I think the world champion, he's a favourite to draw this one.
Yeah, totally. One thing that I see as a plan for Magnus is actually, if he can swap off those two pawns at the edge of the board on the A line, and maybe even lose his weak pawn, I don't think it's enough for Artemiev to objectively win the game.
Yeah, especially if the bishops come off the board, for example. Yeah, I agree.
Too many pawns on one side. And whilst Magnus is thinking, well, what do you think about some answers to our quiz of the day?
Oh, yeah. And if people want to join, they need to hurry, because if Magnus is able to draw this game, it's going to be over for today.
It will be, yeah. And we're asking what new technology would help chess. And I really do like Vasilis's suggestion. What do you guys think about new technology to help chess? Two things. One, auto-centering pieces in their squares at over-the-board tournaments.
I like it, yeah.
And two, a draw button on the clock to better control draw offers. Yeah, I like the auto-centering, yeah.
I like that, definitely like that one. I do kind of like, though, whenever I'm at an over-the-board tournament to watch players, when you can sort of see that one player is about to sort of offer a draw, and sort of that awkwardness sometimes. I don't want to lose that.
Yeah. When we were playing youth tournaments, Ivanka, especially if there's a language barrier, if you're playing someone from a foreign country when you're really young, it's really awkward, right? If you say draw, they might not understand. Yeah. So there was always this kind of universal signal. It's like, draw, please. A button would be maybe safer and simpler and couldn't be misinterpreted.
But it also would be quite nice if you could just block that button and say, no, I don't want to draw, don't know. We play, and so you don't get disturbed by it.
Yeah.
But also, I mean, in the past, I played a game that I was against a grandmaster as well. I was quite young, and he said, would you like a draw? So I sat there thinking for 20 minutes, and he was just walking around. He suddenly realised he was winning. So I came back, I shook his hand, and then he was like, oh, I didn't offer you a draw. Are you resigning? And stuff like that, a draw button would definitely help to avoid.
That's true. That is true.
Yeah, definitely. And
how does it usually work, the draw offers? So when you're in, you think an equal position.
Yeah.
You will say, should we take a draw? Is that how it works?
Yeah.
Yeah, say I'd offer a draw.
Yeah.
And, or would you like a draw? And there's a kind of rules of etiquette here. I mean, for instance, the side who has a material advantage and is pushing for the win is the one that offers the draw. The one who is just defending shouldn't really offer the draw. And also, once you've been refused once, you shouldn't be asking for a draw in every single time, because I've had that happen, and that's just distraction. And you should only offer in your own time. So if I'm thinking, no, Houska, you make your move and then you offer the draw, and that's it.
Yeah, so you make your move before you press the clock. You say, draw, or would you like a draw? And then you press the clock, you let your opponent think about it. You don't offer after they've already been thinking for 20 minutes, for example, because that would disrupt their thinking and maybe change their thought process. And you've got to be a bit respectful of that.
Yeah. Okay, so you make your move, you say, I offer a draw, then you press your clock.
Yes.
And
you let them think.
Yeah. Let them think. And I do remember when it comes to draw offers, when I was a kid, I offered this draw to someone and I thought, okay, it's just a perpetual check. And then I realised, no, I have checkmate on the board and I've already offered a draw.
And then you can't take it back?
No, I couldn't take it back. And I was like, okay, so we have seen a trade of pawns. And what happened next was that my opponent just goes, he makes a move, he says, no, I would like to play on. And I was like, yes, because, you know, I was about 10 years old. So I was literally jumping. And so I made another move, and then he goes, oh, yeah, it's just a draw. I'll accept that. No. And I was like, no.
Yeah, because they can't use it forever, right? It's
No,
for the next move.
Only valid for one turn. And, yeah, so that's, it's nice to have that counter. Awesome. I agree, Vasilis, good idea. And meanwhile, the queen steps forward and the queen and bishop are lined up on the same diagonal, attacking the pawn. And whilst Magnus is thinking, I also want to share with you Jimmy Cecil's answer, which is the technology that I think would help chess is AI that can explain the reasoning behind the moves. And they say, I can't do that, Dave, because...
Telling me why I can't make that move.
Yeah, exactly. No. OK. And Magnus steps forward with his pawn on the left, one square. And it's all about whether Magnus can hold the draw. And Kaya is right. It looks like this game is heading towards a draw. And if that happens, then the match is over. So if you do want to enter our quiz of the day, then hurry up and submit your answer. And remember, you have to tweet us using 3 hashtags: Chess Champs, Opera and Aimchess US Rapid. And the prize up for grabs, well, it's been kindly sponsored by Opera, Chessable course, 1-year Playing Magnus Plus membership and 1-year Chess24 Premium membership.
Go ahead, tweet your answers, you guys. And Artemiev now thinking time management must be much healthier in this game, though. But do you see chances of a win for him, David?
Yeah, for sure, he's been quicker, more confident, but his winning chances are tiny, I think, here for Artemiev. The draw is by far the most likely results. And Magnus, he's the one fighting for the draw as black. White is the one with the move. It's a completely symmetrical position. Same number of pieces, same material. But because you have the move with white, you can start attacking, you can go on the front foot. The reason Magnus has pushed that pawn is just to put it on a light square, so it cannot be captured by a white bishop. But white has 2 very tempting options right now. White can bring the white rook across, attacking the black queen, trying to kick that black queen to a worse square. Or white can initiate some real direct action, and that would involve taking a pawn immediately. This must be what Artemiev's thinking about first. Normally in chess, again, you look at captures, taking this pawn, for example, and then only after you've worked out what happens there, then you calculate the threat to bring the rook across, for example, to attack the queen. So let's check out what happens if the white bishop takes this pawn. Magnus, I think, might even give a check, forcing the white king away just to declare its intentions, and then we might well see a trade and just a capture of this pawn. So actually, back to level pawns. I slightly prefer white's chances still because black's king is potentially more vulnerable than white's. White's king has a lot of pawn protection around it, but you are running out of material and it's difficult to go for the black king. That is why Artemiev said no more trades. I don't think I can create enough with the bishops off the board. So he keeps the bishops on and brings his rook across, attacking the black queen. We see a black queen give check. The white king step back. I think blocking with the white pawn there would have just loosened white's pawn structure too much. So it's better to keep the king nice and safe, tucked away. And now Magnus needs to deal with the threat against this pawn. This diagonal, that's where white's hopes lie. So the most likely is that he'll push this pawn forward to a light square where it's nice and safe. Or he can maybe defend it with his king. I think these moves give him very, very decent chances of holding the draw. He doesn't necessarily need to react and defend this pawn yet, but I would just want to get it out of the firing line.
Wow.
Okay, first he moves his rook into the game. Yeah, this one looks good too, actually, the more I think about it. Although the evaluation bar, not such a big fan. That's a surprise. It looks good, though, on the face of it. It looks like you're trying to get through to the 7th rank.
Right. And you're also saying to white, hey, take the pawn. It doesn't bother me because, of course, once the trades have all happened, the pawn on e2 will still be up for grabs.
Yeah, so black can restore material balance by taking this pawn. And, yeah, now still no way through to the black king, and unless you can get to it, it's just an easy draw. The queens will come off at some point, or the rooks will come off, and no way for either side to create a passed pawn, a dangerous pawn, to run through to the end. So, OK, the current position is this one, and we don't think this is enough to create winning chances, Ivanka. What else could white try? Why does the evaluation but I like white's position so much. It looks completely balanced to me. Maybe the white queen has to go start attacking some pawns, either this direction or this direction. Just it has to get active. You can't move the white rook off the back rank. If you move it up the board, then the black rook comes down and whoops, there's going to be some nasty checks against the white king.
Yeah, I think the queen has to do some probing. Okay, and she comes out to the left side, attacking the pawn on a6.
So it's all about this pawn right now. But Magnus, he can just defend it. He can slip his queen back, defend it horizontally. This looks very safe to me. Maybe you can even start trying to challenge against white's bishop somehow. No, OK, let's stay solid. I think Magnus should just drop his queen back, and this looks completely safe.
I agree.
All right, Artemiev, he has to come up with something. He has to win this game to have any chances of tying this first match. It's looking really good for Magnus right now with 2 wins. So the first win for Magnus today, that was amazing play by the world champion. The second one, maybe getting a little lucky with Artemiev just struggling with internet connection and time.
Yes, fully agreed.
Yeah. And here, just doing what he has to do to get that draw. Is that kind of what it's looking like?
Yeah, Magnus just playing fully solid, fully defensive chess. OK, he's actually giving up a pawn, dropping his queen back. OK, so there's tension between the queens. Artemiev slightly frowned there. He never normally gives anything away on his camera, but...
The bar does not like Magnus's decision.
I'm trying to understand this.
Oh!
Magnus just suddenly reacting. I'm trying to understand. He's given up a pawn, but there's 2 different ways that white can actually win a pawn right now.
He is shocked, Magnus Carlsen.
This was a mouse slip,
Was it a mouse slip?
Maybe he meant to put the bishop on that square.
And also, OK, look at this. White can win a pawn in 2 different ways. The top computer suggestion is for the white queen just to step up 1 square and capture the pawn in front of it. That's a free pawn. No compensation at all for black. That's a big advantage for white. Or if white wants to be extra kind of safe, you can trade off the queens, and then remember that white bishop is eyeing up a pawn. Black's H pawn in the corner. So you can win a pawn in 2 different ways. Jovanka, I think it was maybe not a mouse slip of the bishop on that square. I think maybe the queen, I showed the best move, or the safest move for black was to bring the black queen up 2 squares. Maybe he's dropped the black queen up 1 square instead.
So you think a mouse slip, maybe?
It must be, right?
It must be,
But it took some time before that big reaction.
Yeah. Maybe he just made the move and just kind of sat back. Still, that position was in his mind, and then he kind of tuned out. And when he zoned back in, he realised the queen was on the wrong square.
OK, and Artemiev has indeed snacked on that pawn that was now up for grabs. And wow.
Well, is he losing for Magnus? What can he do?
It's very difficult. It's still not necessarily lost because white's extra pawn on the corner, that A pawn, it still takes an age to start motoring up the board. But it's one-sided traffic.
Yeah.
It's definitely Artemiev in the driver's seat now. And if he can get that pawn up 2 or 3 more squares, that pawn's a potential winner. OK, this bishop now attacking the black queen, skewering the black queen to the black rook. The black queen, once it moves, the black rook might drop. The black queen only has 2 safe squares, maybe.
2 safe squares. I only saw the 1.
Yep, so you can challenge against the white queen, or you can go and put pressure on the white rook.
Magnus almost looks like he's ready to resign here. He is just very annoyed with himself. All right, and thinking now to save this game, to get that draw that he needs. But maybe we are having some drama here on the first day in the final, you guys.
Yeah, I mean, in an unexpected way as well. OK, so David highlighted this possibility. Magnus offers his queen for trade, and the queens are now off the board.
And we're in that endgame?
Yeah, we're in that endgame. And now it comes down to whether Magnus can hold this position. He is a pawn down, and white's pawn isn't necessarily the best one. You know, it's only on the 3rd row. It does require a lot of defensive work to kind of keep it on the board.
Yep, agreed. I think this is the best that Magnus could have hoped for after he blundered his pawn. The black rook is happily going to slide across and start putting pressure on that white pawn. The black bishop as well can come down and start maybe putting some pressure on that white extra pawn. Yeah, decent drawing chances for Magnus. I still think Artemiev, he's so good at endgames that he should convert this. If he doesn't win this game, he won't have any confidence, I think, tomorrow in endgames. Because this one is the best he can hope for against the world champion. But meanwhile, he goes active with the white rook. Sensible. Lots of targets on that 7th row. Black will most likely defend his pawns with a bishop.
Yeah.
And yeah, I would say odds here are maybe 60% a white win, maybe 40% chance Black can hold, but no winning chances at all for Magnus.
No.
It's purely backs to the wall, all-out defence, and he'll need every ounce of that World Championship magic.
Yeah, that resourcefulness.
That resourcefulness, exactly.
Yeah.
Advantage capitalisation, I'm trying to think back. Artemiev was quite high, right?
I can check.
Up at almost 80%.
He is on,
78.
yeah, he is on 80%.
80%, yeah.
And Magnus, we know resourcefulness, that is not his best place, 19% only.
He struggled throughout the tour, Magnus, when he has this disadvantage. And yeah, those stats are very relevant right now. Okay, Magnus trying to eliminate some pawns. Meanwhile, he's offering this trade. If white takes that pawn, Black will just replace it with another pawn, and Black's rook is guarding everything on this 5th rank. So just trying to displace the white bishop, trying to kick it back as well. I think the best way to try and hold this as Black is to eliminate as many pawns as possible on this right half of the board. And long term, you might even have to give up the Black bishop for white's extra pawn on the other side. But if you can eliminate all the pawns off the board, at least you'll hold.
And Artemiev retreating the bishop. So now I think the only move to defend the pawn that's under attack. Ooh, what's this move? What's happening? I thought he was just simply going to move his bishop, and now Magnus is saying...
He's just trying to surprise us, Jovanka, and I don't understand it either. Looks like that drops another pawn.
Playing on Artemiev's clock, maybe?
No, he has an idea.
What is his idea if white's rook goes and captures Black's central pawn on that E-line right now?
OK, so he is going to go for the A pawn that stepped forward.
But how? The white rook would have come across and defended it. I don't really understand. And OK, Artemiev trusts Magnus.
Maybe it's just a case of mutual blindness. I missed that defensive move that you highlighted. OK, now Magnus stepping forward to the 2nd row, attacking a pawn.
Yeah, so the Black rook getting active. The best way to stop these passed pawns, these scary pawns, when there's no way to blockade them with your own pieces, is to get a rook behind. And Black's rook, yes, it's attacking a pawn, but it's also getting ready to just switch across to the A-line and keep an eye on white's pawn from behind. OK, I like this last move from Carlsen. I like also what Artemiev's been doing, but I'm surprised he didn't invest another 20, 30 seconds onto capturing Black's pawn just 2 moves ago. OK, that's a check.
The Black king steps forward.
Okay.
You rarely see this happen, actually. Black king gets so ambitious, leaves the bishop and the pawns behind in his wake.
Spartan king.
Trailblazer there. Sorry.
It looks as if he's trying to checkmate himself in the centre of the board somehow.
OK, so Artemiev pushes his pawn 1 square forward. This is beautiful strategy. Now the big threat is just to step up with the rook to the bottom row.
I think white's just winning on the spot, Jovanka. Yeah. If we see a bishop trade, white can just take off this Black bishop and then step up to the 7th rank. White's rook has a couple of pawns. It's going to snap off another pawn.
OK.
White's rook defends its pawn and wins another pawn in the process. White's about to go 2 pawns up. In a rook endgame, a 2-pawn deficit is too much. Magnus, he looks disinterested. He knows that this game is gone now.
OK.
It was a mouse slip or a blunder, which cost him, and Artemiev's wrapped this one up nicely. Just take that pawn, get it off the board, and Artemiev will guide this one home to victory.
Yes, absolutely. And the chess gods really smiled on Artemiev today.
Yeah.
I mean, in that moment...
Maybe it's just balancing things out, right? He got disconnected in the last game, and maybe the chess gods feel guilty about that. And
and Magnus... we have a result. Magnus resigns.
Wow, what a comeback by Vladislav Artemiev. A blunder, a mouse slip, who knows, by Magnus Carlsen, giving Artemiev a chance here to come back in the match and to tie. But he still has to win the final game coming up in 15 minutes. Artemiev to be able to win this. And, OK, Magnus looking over this, just raising his eyebrows. He hates this. So what a game. Let's learn something from it.
I guess the main thing to learn from this game is to always double check before you make a move. And here, Magnus, I think his intention was to simply drop back the queen 2 squares. This would have been the best or the safest move in the position, guarding Black's pawn on this side. But Magnus, maybe a moment of blindness, maybe a moment of carelessness. He just dropped his queen back one square, and this was actually a really clumsy square because it doesn't defend a pawn. White won this pawn and later clinched the game. It was maybe a mouse slip, as we'll find out later on in the interview, but in this position, it was either to drop the queen back 2 squares or to plant this bishop forward, as Jovanka mentioned. That would have saved the game for black. Instead, he did just let the pawn go. And if we fast forward to show why Magnus resigned, it was actually Artemiev's move, and Magnus didn't even want to let Artemiev get the chance to win some pawns. Artemiev just simplified, traded off the queens, the bishops, and now would have gone 2 pawns up. Slowly but surely, this pawn would tie down the black rook. Meanwhile, he would create an extra pass pawn with his 3 versus 2 advantage on this side.
It looked like it was all over for Vladislav Artemiev, but Magnus Carlsen giving him a chance, and he took it. So a comeback by Artemiev, winning game 3. He still has to win game 4, though, to tie the first match in the final. Both of these players, and I bet most of the players that we have had in this tournament, the Aimchess US Rapid, are old enough to remember time without computers and chess without computers helping them. So no doubt the way chess is studied has changed a lot in the past 25 years.
With all the technological advancements in the last few years, how different is your chess training now compared to when you were younger?
Around 2002, the strongest computer was still, on average, a laptop computer weaker than the strongest human. Now, you could give Stockfish 30 seconds, you can give me 24 hours, and I'm going to get thrashed 100 times out of 100. And so with that has come this drive to emulate computer play. The quantity of information that computers produce in terms of the opening, in terms of tactics, has grown exponentially. And so training has become a lot harder. You have to master a lot more stuff opening-wise. People's defensive capacities have improved tremendously because you can see, you can give a computer a totally lost position, you still won't be able to beat it. So you see this push and pull effect. One type opening is refuted, but something that was not played since the 60s all of a sudden is revived. So I think that's going to keep happening, maybe at a greater pace.
And every time I think it cannot improve, it keeps improving. So that means that as chess players, we start looking more and more stupid because the computers start pointing out all of our mistakes instantly. And to prepare, we have to use the engines more and more. So before, maybe you could sometimes say, okay, the computer here is not right. I think, and we trust our human expertise, but this becomes less and less the case.
I remember we used to get these in-format books, and that used to be back then, the only source of games to watch, like top-level games, and it used to have some analysis. But right now, you have access to so many things. Like there are these Chessable courses, there are these databases which are updated every week. Online you get access to everything. But back then, when I was as a kid, my main source of learning was from books. It's completely different style of play when I look at it. Like when the kids nowadays, they grew up with the laptops, so they don't read as many books as we did. So we have a little bit more of a bookish kind of chess, I feel. But in my childhood, I was always told that playing too much blitz is bad for your chess. This was the advice which I used to get, and probably it's not right. It doesn't hurt maybe. So there's a big difference when it comes to thinking about how you prepare.
Now I see that young players think that opening is most important. Or maybe only openings.
These days, it's a lot easier in a good way, that you're not as disadvantaged. More players from different countries can play as long as you have stable internet, and there's so many resources online. Not only can you play, but you can be told, how to improve much easier than before.
I'm super excited to see what new ceilings are going to be broken and how our playing styles are going to change, what new information humans are going to be able to acquire, what new playing styles we're going to be seeing at the top. And I'm very happy to be around for the ride.
Yeah, what a time to be alive and what a time to study chess. Now, world champion Magnus Carlsen, he says he's still a big fan of those traditional chess books, but he does not have a very strict regime for how he studies the game of chess.
I would say mainly these days, like I play through hundreds of games probably each day.
Now, do you have to be very disciplined and strict with yourself to not end up only playing blitz and bullet chess online?
Well, I'm a grown-up. I can do whatever I want. So I would say I think you have to find your individual approach that works for you. But I'm somebody who has always thought about chess all the time, but I've never sort of liked or had discipline to say, now I'll do this and now I will do that, and I should not play bullet because that's bad for me. I've more been like, well, I feel like playing some bullet or I'm playing some blitz. Now I feel like doing some more serious chess work, so I'll do that.
So what do you predict for chess because of computers in the next 25 years?
That's very, very hard to say. I think engines, neural networks, that will become even much stronger, probably level the playing field even more than it already has. Apart from that, I don't want to say too much, because every prediction that's ever been made about the future has been wrong. And you usually end up looking pretty foolish.
Well, that is exactly what we've been asking our viewers today to do, though, Ivanka. And do we have some more answers on technology?
Yeah, we're asking what new technology would help chess. And Manoj N says we need a portable augmented reality device to project chess over any flat surface. It will make recording analysis of over-the-board games easy. It will also give the players experience of over-the-board chess without the need to carry the board and pieces. Yeah, I also like the kind of futuristic tone to that. You can just have this. There you go. Let's play a game, Kaya.
Yeah, I like it.
Yeah, and St. Helens Chess Club, a technology to help chess would be self-writing pieces combined with a clock that only allowed you to press it if the move was both legal and complete. It would stop those scruffy over-the-board time scramble finishes. I love that idea. You know, you're trying to press the clock and it's like, no, adjust your pieces, please.
It's definitely the one downside to try and play bullet chess on, over the board, right?
Yeah.
Just not physically possible.
Yeah. And finally, Sam Ray says, Chess AI being able to explain the concepts behind complicated calculations and move recommendations. This would help the next generation not rely too much on the evaluation bar. And if you two want to enter our quiz of the day, then you can do so by tweeting us by using 3 hashtags, which are Chess Champs, Opera and Aimchess US Rapid. And the prize up for grabs, it's a big one today. It is one D4 chessboard course, 1 year Play Magnus Plus membership, and finally 1 year Chess24 Premium membership.
Yeah, what a cool prize. All about studying using technology. And we're having some fun revisiting those Howell's how-to videos. And now David Howell will use one of those traditional over-the-board chessboards to explain what online chess is all about.
There are 3 major differences between over-the-board chess and online chess. The first one is that you can't see your opponent's faces sometimes. So it's harder to bluff if you can't see their expressions, if you know that they can't see your expressions. The second one is that players love to pre-move online. This means that they make the move before it's even come up on the board. They can save time. The move automatically happens no matter what their opponent does. The third and the biggest difference is mouse slips. This happens all the time. Sometimes you try to play a move, you don't put it on the right square, and your position is destroyed. This is one example from the Champions Chess Tour. Sorry. in this position, Magnus Carlsen had the black pieces against Jan Nepomniachtchi. He actually has a winning position as well as black because white's king is so bad, it's so weak. However, instead of playing his intended move to give check to the white king, Magnus Carlsen made a mouse slip. He dropped his queen on the wrong square. Instead of moving it 2 squares, he only moved it 1. But here, the queen can be captured by white's pawn or white's rook. So after making this mouse slip, Magnus Carlsen resigned.
Yay! We haven't seen that in so long.
I know, I'm getting older. My wrist isn't as strong as it used to be. Yeah.
Still great at it, and I still have no chance. I don't understand.
I'm not missing much, Claire. It doesn't come in useful too often.
Another clever skill by David Howell. And now, you guys, every day in the show, David analyzes the online performance of one of the viewers. You can leave a comment on Chess24 community to have the chance to be analyzed live here in the show. And who are we analyzing today, David?
It is the turn of Chess123, and as the username suggests, Chess123 loves a bit of chess, and I have analysed the most 40 recent Blitz games on Chess24. Here we see the general stats, the same stats we've been analysing for the top Grandmasters, and Chess123 maybe needs to work on these openings. A 22% accuracy level in the openings compared to 66%, which is normal for players of a similar rating. So check out those chessable courses, study those openings, because in the rest of the areas, we do see Chess123 is pretty decent. Okay at time management, maybe slightly below the average. Resourcefulness, very resourceful. Decent score there. Advantage capitalization, maybe this can be worked on in conjunction with tactics. I suggest doing a lot of puzzles. You can do that on Chess24 with the premium membership. Endless puzzles, infinite puzzles there for all levels, and also endgame work needs to be done. As we see, win rate here with white, 35%. With black, slightly lower. Maybe some work with the black pieces needs to be done. And openings, it does look like, especially in these openings here, we see in red, these openings need work, especially if we look 5 games in the King's Knight opening, but always seeming to reach a disadvantage early, and quite a big disadvantage, a 5.5 disadvantage in these openings. So check out these specific openings and do some work on them. Queen's Pawn game is pretty much the best opening for Chess123.
Stick to that one.
Stick to that one, exactly. And again, more opening stats. It's clear, though, some areas may be less strong than the others. And advantage capitalization. Here we can see 67%, 67% when having a +4 advantage. That's pretty decent, but could still be improved. 50% only, though, when having a more than +1.5 advantage. And again, that can be improved. The averages we see here, 66%, maybe up to 68% for similar rated opponents. And resourcefulness, this is actually one of the best areas for Chess123. So stick to being resourceful, but also working on those puzzles will help these stats even further. And tactics, especially, I was looking at the stats earlier, per stage, this could be improved. We see in the opening, a lot of inaccuracies, especially. This is where to work on. Some still in the middle game and end game, but fewer. And likewise, in the end game, check out these stats. In equal end games, never winning a game. Equal end games, maybe just practice, play some sparring games with some friends in equal positions and try to eke out those advantages. Or study Artemiev's games. Clearly, that could be a trick. And let's roll down to our favorite stat.
Yes.
Fridays seem to be the day for Chess123.
The only day.
The only day. Not bothering with chess during the week, not at the weekends either, but Fridays, that seems to be Chess123's chess day.
Wow, and because there was like 40 games played on Chess24 here that was analyzed. So Fridays, the day for chess. Well, it's Saturday and a good day for chess for Magnus Carlsen and Vladislav Artemiev. Game 4 starting in 22nd. It's a must-win situation for Vladislav Artemiev. He is sitting in Russia, and it's getting late for him as well. The clock ticking now past the 8:30 in the evening, 7:30 for Magnus Carlsen in Oslo. And again, must-win situation for Vladislav Artemiev. Even if he made a comeback in Game 3, it's not enough. He still has to win this one as well. With the black pieces, Magnus again only needs a draw. He wasn't able to get that, though, in Game 3. So what should you expect from the world champion now with the white pieces?
I suspect that he might open with his king's pawn. And there we go. I mean, he knows how to lock the game down.
Yeah.
And he wasn't especially successful in game 2. So do something different. And here we go. This is Artemia's attempt to unbalance the position.
Yeah, it's the Sicilian defense, one of the most counter-attacking openings in chess. And it's actually very hard to shut down and force a draw in the Sicilian defense. That's why Artemiev has chosen it, because he knows Magnus will have to work for that draw. Magnus, though, he's got experience, for example, in a World Championship match against Vishy Anand. He reached the final game, only needing a draw with white, and this is exactly what he's chosen. He's copied that game that he played against Anand to secure the world title. He's given a check with his bishop. So no open Sicilian, nothing too crazy, just calmly developing a bishop, calmly developing a piece. And no matter how black blocks this check, there's no way to run away from this check. OK, he blocks with the knight. No matter what happens now, white has an easy plan of development. That's the main thing. He's going to castle his king, he's going to push some white pawns in the centre, and he's going to say, I'm solid. What are you going to do to unbalance things? What are you going to do to scare me? OK, Magnus, meanwhile, pushing this white pawn forward. This is trendy. This has been played at the top level several times. Is this what Wesley So recommends in his chessable course, Jovanka?
I think so.
I think it is. So maybe
Magnus checked it out.
Yeah, maybe Magnus learning from some of his biggest rivals. Okay, knights developing there as well. Just, it's all about the centre. Those knights gravitating towards the middle of the board. Black was attacking a pawn, actually. That's why white defended it with a piece. And now black has to decide how to develop, how to get that black king away to safety. White is ready to castle and explode open the centre, so black has to be quick and accurate.
And interestingly enough, he's kind of chosen a line, with Magnus that is, where he doesn't, well, he has mixed results, let's put it this way. You know, he's played Anish Giri and lost with the white pieces. He's played Wei Yi, a very strong Chinese grandmaster, and won. He's also played this line against Vasilin Topolov, former world champion, lost there. And finally beaten Alexei Dreyev, a Russian grandmaster. So...
a mixed bag.
Mixed bag.
Yeah, and that's slightly surprising to me because I've always thought of Magnus as the biggest expert, especially in this, what we call the bishop b5 check Sicilian, the Moscow variation of the Sicilian. And, OK, he's going for a very trendy, a very modern kind of invention, this like kind of pawn push on the side of the board, especially with white's a-pawn there. That, until the last 2 or 3 years, was almost unheard of, almost unseen. But Artemiev, meanwhile, he needs to find a way again to get Magnus out of that comfort zone, to maybe steer the game away from those previous experiences Magnus has had in this line. So Artemiev, I don't think he's faced this too many times, but even if he has, he knows that Magnus, for sure, knows all the plans, knows all the ideas. That's why he's pondering right now for almost 2 minutes. Which pawn is he going to push? Black is going to push a pawn, that is guaranteed. But which one? You could push a pawn to attack white's light-squared bishop. No, he pushes a pawn to develop his own bishop first. And again, this is Wesley So's chessable course, as far as I know. White's pawn pushing up, just trying to gain as much space on this left flank as possible. And, OK, how will Artemiev react? OK, he's consistent. He's just getting ready to castle that black king away.
And this is a repetition of Magnus Carlsen against Anish Giri in the Chessable Masters finals, in fact, from last year. And that game actually continued with Magnus castling his king and Anish Giri pushing forward his pawn on the left to attack the light-squared bishop.
And how did the game end?
It was a loss for Magnus.
OK, very interesting. Very interesting.
Magnus definitely has an improvement up his sleeve.
OK. This is going to be interesting to follow then. Wow. So the next move in that game was castling?
Yep.
OK. Do you still think that's his next move in this one?
Yeah.
Yeah.
That's by far the most natural move, at least. But the fact that Magnus is thinking for almost a minute, OK, he doesn't try something new yet.
But so at some point, he will. Oh, you have to let us know, Jovanka, when that improvement has happened.
I will let you all know when Magnus deploys his new idea.
And in that game, black castled as well.
He okay. Not quite.
Not quite.
He attacked the bishop, but OK, still could transpose.
OK, so maybe various different move orders in order to reach the same destination, the same position. I expect white to maybe just shuffle the white rook in the centre, just behind white's central pawn, keep that nice and protected. You could maybe make an argument for gaining even more space on this left flank, pushing a pawn there. several different ideas. That's what he does. He tries to undermine black's structure on that left side. And actually, if black exchanges, then white's bishop will happily recapture and white's rook comes to life. If black blocks it up and doesn't trade these pawns, then white's pawn is super advanced and in an endgame could be a bit of a nuisance for black to deal with. So a big decision now for Artemiev to trade or to block, to kind of just bypass white's pawn and say, no, that white rook is staring at its own pawn.
Yeah, we're actually gone back and followed Magnus Carlsen against Alexei Dreyev. Now, this one was a positive result for Magnus. In that game, black decided, hey, I don't need to either trade or block that pawn. I can just ignore it. And instead, he pushed a pawn in the centre. In fact, the most popular move, there aren't too many options because this isn't the most theoretical of positions. The most popular move is just to retreat the knight that's sitting on f6 to relocate it to the e8 square, but only been played 5 times.
Wow, OK. That one's sophisticated.
Yeah.
So a bit of a dilemma now for Artemiev. So not only does he have to have the result in the back of his mind, his desired outcome of imbalancing things, making it a bit crazy, taking some chances maybe later on in the game, but also right now in a middle game, which Carlsen is clearly familiar with. How is he going to navigate his way out of this temporarily? How is he going to get those black pieces active? Right now, the black knights are both blocking their bishops. It makes a lot of sense, actually, to move one of those black knights. You can move either of them. Making pawn pushes also makes sense. Personally, I would want to clarify the tension on this left side, but yeah, it is a big decision to make, and maybe you can delay that.
And Artemiev decides to trade off those pawns.
OK, so bishops, light-squared bishops leaving the board as well. Magnus actually pre-moved that last capture. That's the thing to do. If you know that move would only happen if your opponent captures a piece, then you can pre-move and save a couple of seconds on the clock. But yeah, pre-moving, it's dangerous. It needs a lot of practice. And now the black knight stepping back, kicking away that white rook, which has retreated. And if you look at the white rook, it's nice and active. It's also staring at an isolated pawn. Black's pawn on that left side is going to tie down his pieces later on. Might be a potential weakness.
And what do you think of Magnus's rook retreat? It looks a little bit odd, but I mean, it does certainly have some points. I mean, in a later stage of the game, perhaps white's rook sitting there on the f1 square can relocate itself to the left.
Yep. So ideally, white would love to develop the bishop next turn, then shift the white queen up 1 square and white's rook next to the king. Slide across. Teamwork. Use the 2 rooks together. If you can stack up those rooks with white, you have a great position. Artemiev needs to be quick and find some counterplay of his own.
Yes, he certainly does. And interestingly enough, according to my database, no games have been played in this position. This is entirely new territory. But someone did have a look at this position in 2014. Wow. So quite a long time ago. And they investigated the knight jumping from f6 over to g4. What do you think about that knight hop?
Yeah, so this knight hop, you mentioned, well, we discussed as well that black needs to do something quickly, and this one, getting the knight out of the eye line of the black bishop, makes some sense. The black bishop now has found a decent diagonal, and it's got a lot of targets. But this black knight leap, after the white pawn kicks it back, does invite some trades. The black knight will pretty much be forced to step into the centre, and I think that the more pieces get traded off, the more this is going to help Magnus get to that goal of at least a draw. No matter how black recaptures now, white simply has a plan of bringing the bishop out, bringing the queen forward and shuffling the rook to the corner.
Yeah.
I think this just is too accommodating. I think black needs actually to keep pieces on the board, so I would be surprised if black didn't move the knight in the other direction maybe later on in the game. OK. And how can black shake things up a little bit? Because white, as you mentioned, has a really clear-cut plan. Develop the dark square bishop, line up the queen on the same diagonal, shift the rook all the way over to the A-line. Pressure. Yeah, that's pressure. I like white's position because of that plan, simply. And for black, it's less clear what to do. The 2 things I would be tempted to go for with black is, firstly, to build a pawn centre. This one, it might be strong, but it also might backfire. White also has some time. For example, if you push this pawn forward as black, the white bishop will also keep an eye on this pawn, meaning that you can't push forward yet. So black still needs a few moves to build up. The other thing I would be tempted to do as black, instead of pushing in the centre right now, would be to maybe push on this flank. And the whole idea would be, once white's bishop moves forward. And as I mentioned, this knight plan, just kind of keeping an eye on this diagonal. Now, at some point, to just plant a knight in the centre. And the reason I want to put this pawn here is because it's much better defended than it would have been previously. It's hard to blockade. And if black can plant a knight in the centre, it might at least clog up white's position. For example, here already, putting the knight in would mean that white can never trade, because this would end in a double attack in a fork. And black needs to just look for some activity, some active pieces. Maybe that would start with retreating a piece. Maybe that will start with pushing a pawn. But either way, he has to look for something. It's just too simple, too kind of harmonious for white right now. And that's Magnus's comfort zone. Also, Jovanka, look at the clocks. 15 minutes, plays 8 minutes. That is dangerous for Artemiev. OK, he brings the queen out. That is decent as well. Just keeping this white bishop honest, keeping the white bishop tied down to this pawn.
But it's not, though.
OK, you're right, actually. If the white bishop jumps forward, you cannot take this pawn yet.
It's poisoned, David. It comes at great cost. There you go. Black's queen trapped.
It's walked headfirst into that trap, actually. Yeah, so why can't white's bishop just move? This pawn is not... It's just not possible to take it. Maybe the idea at some point is to plant this knight in anyway, and the queen kind of indirectly defends this square that the black knight wants to use.
Yeah, that's true. And also, you know, maybe there are some kind of problems with developing the dark square bishop, because now the knight can jump to the g4 square and start asking questions to the dark square bishop.
True, true. No, decent move there from Artemiev. I quite like it. Maybe Magnus in this current position, after the queen has developed, maybe he's going to try and kick it away. It's on a decent square, so maybe it's time to relocate the white knight to this side of the board.
And that is a Carlsen-esque move there.
Just trying to get in Carlsen's mind, yeah. He likes to improve his pieces slowly and surely.
Exactly, and he loves to control the position and just push his opponents back and control those squares. A thing of beauty.
Yeah. So right now, personally, I slightly prefer white. You, Jovanka?
Double-edged, I would say.
Still in the balance.
Yeah, I'm not quite sure.
And Artemiev needs to ensure that Magnus isn't able to just control things, and he wants to keep things in the balance.
And what do you think about this move?
OK, pushing a pawn. I guess he's freed up his bishop, but as you mentioned, he didn't necessarily need to.
No, but I mean, maybe this is a really clever way of kind of keeping his position solid and at the same time giving his dark square bishop actually an alternative when it comes to developing. You know, the bishop might put itself on the b2 square, challenge its counterpart for this long diagonal, and then continue with the merry plan of moving the queen, rook shifts over, pressure.
Maybe. Yeah, it's yet to be decided. It's definitely unclear where the white bishop belongs. So I think Magnus just keeping his options open. Also, long-term strategy, keeping pawns on light squares. Your opponent has a dark squared bishop. Makes some sense. Yeah, we trust Magnus when it comes to these strategic moves. We know that Artemiev, meanwhile, also has this sublime positional sense, and he will be looking to justify the fact that black long-term has an isolated pawn of his own on the A line. He'll be looking to trade that off or compensate for it with active pieces.
Well, one thing we have noticed with Artemiev is that he is using a lot of time on the clock, and he has made a quick move and he's retreated his knight. It did allow white to potentially jump with his knight forward, but Magnus said, no, I'm going to develop the bishop to the long diagonal. OK, now Artemiev steps back with his queen. But what's Artemiev's plan?
No plan, I think. Just keeping that black queen nice and safe. As you mentioned, white's knight could have jumped forward in a few directions to attack it. So I think he's just...
But he has to do something.
Preempting that.
Or maybe he doesn't need to do anything. That is his plan. He's just saying to Magnus, you do what you like, and I'm just going to bide my time for the right moment.
No, I just think there was a threat, Jovanka, of the white knight jumping forward, and he was just trying to step away from the threat. And
yeah, but I mean now, like, I'm trying to get in his mind, like, what's his plan now? Yeah.
Plan.
I mean, I know it's white to move. I'm just trying to think of the match situation.
Control squares and wait.
Just wait.
I think so. I mean, there's just no action happening, right? No pawn breaks, no pawn pushes.
It's like a crocodile, just waiting in the water.
Lurking. Yeah, and I think same for Magnus. There's no way to break through with pawns, so you have to play with pieces. And
OK, and what's the optimum setup? Because, I mean, the moves that I'm kind of consistently calculating are, say, if the white queen jumps forward, just moves forward, just to kind of clear the path. Yeah, clear the path for the rook. I mean, the moves that, if I were playing with the white pieces, I would always calculate. I was thinking about this move, but I kind of rejected it because I thought that the black knight could actually make a big leap forward into the centre and kind of say, hey, I'm going to block you off.
Yeah, so white's queen and bishop have teamed up. That's those two pieces now, they are completely neutralising black's dark squared bishop and potentially creating some threats against it. And Jovanka, you mentioned a knight jump for black. We have to check this out because Artemiev, he's ticking down on the clock. He's going to be starting to itch for these really concrete lines to create some threats. And if the black knight does jump in, then we can see that white will maybe be able to create some threats of his own. So, OK, you want to go this way. The black knight can use another square as well, can go to this direction. Yeah. Which one did you want to utilise? OK, if the black knight goes this way, both these knight jumps, by the way, target a pawn, then I think white's knight could even jump forward. This, I think, is Magnus's sneaky idea. He's unleashed an attack against this bishop, and if black's bishop takes the white bishop, no, white will not even recapture. He'll flick in a check first. He'll play knight takes pawn, check, attacking the king, and when the king moves, then he'll take the black bishop. And in the process, white has won a pawn on this square. So I think this is Magnus's plan. If the knight goes left, in this direction, if the knight goes to the centre, then I think he will just trade off. And you wanted to capture with the pawn?
Yeah.
And if black takes with the pawn, now the white knight will enter the middle and attacking this pawn, also attacking this pawn. This would force black. I think there's only one way to save both of them at the same time. This would force black to push his pawn forward. But now look at this white knight. It's in the centre on a light square. You can only ever trade it off for black's knight, and it's still going to take a bit of time to do that. And I think Magnus is still roughly level, but he would be happy as long as he gets one strong piece. So that's why Magnus has put his queen in the corner. In this position, he's just teaming up some threats on this diagonal.
Do you see chances for Artemiev, though, to get that win? Or is Magnus making it very hard for him?
He's making it hard, but not impossible.
Yeah, I still think there's a lot of play in the position. I mean, plenty of scope for both sides to go wrong. And that's what you want. But there's one thing that worries me about Artemiev's situation, and that is the clock.
Again.
Again, Magnus has just under 13 minutes. Artemiev just under 5.5 minutes.
And it seems so much healthier, the way he spent his time in that game 3 that he eventually won. Now he's kind of maybe a little bit back to the 2 first games.
Yeah, it's no coincidence that he won that game 3 when he had a decent amount of time. Yes, it relied upon a blunder from Magnus, but he still had a few minutes left to convert that advantage. I think with 1 minute, with 30 seconds, he would have still struggled. And now, even if Artemiev manages to wrangle some kind of complications from this position, with 2-3 minutes left on the clock, it's going to be extremely difficult to convert.
What just happened? Magnus just bursting into laughter. Is it something in his head? What is this?
We'll have to ask him afterwards. Magnus, he'll have to reveal to us why he's being so emotional right now, why he's laughing so much.
Such a mystery guy.
Maybe he's just in a good mood, playing some good chess. Yeah. Chess, after all, has the power to make men happy.
We have seen some big blunders and stuff by Magnus, or some bad play after,
some slip-ups in concentration.
Right?
Yeah, that's true.
When these situations occur, when he starts laughing or just loses concentration, maybe.
And Artemiev hasn't lost concentration, but maybe concentrating too hard because he spent such a long time on this last move. He does push a pawn. I mentioned a few turns ago, this maybe is part of black's plan, just to gain some space. And that black pawn is probably better where it is right now than it previously stood. But it doesn't necessarily deal with the tension on that diagonal. And that does give also white time to leap forward with the knight. This is one of his plans that he wasn't really hiding, Magnus. It was a pretty obvious plan, which he declared when he put his white queen in the corner. So the bishops were looking at each other. They had to be traded. Black didn't want to block up that diagonal because it would have just simply blocked his own bishop at the same time. And now white's knight in the centre, looking nice and strong.
Yes.
How to get rid of it? You have to try and trade it off at some point, or kick it back with a pawn.
Or you just ignore it.
Or you play around it. And Artemiev, he's playing around that white knight. Look at this. He's trying to eliminate and trade off his only weakness, black's isolated pawn on that left side. White cannot take it with his own pawn, note, because the queens would be looking at each other. There is a pin on the B line. And, yeah, if he trades that pawn off, suddenly Black's position looks much more kind of consistent, much more coherent, just everything protecting each other in Black's camp once that pawn disappears.
That's true. I agree with that. But there are consequences. For instance, the pawns are traded off. Then this allows the white rook to potentially step over to the B line, and maybe we have some fun along there. Perhaps.
That must be Magnus's plan.
OK, and the queen steps away.
OK, so sneaky.
Oh, danger, danger. OK, we have to show this on the
both
board.
of them?
I mean, no, only one person.
OK.
And that looks like a really innocuous move, doesn't it? Like White's doing too much. After all, it's stepping away from the island of the Black Queen. But take a look at how long range the queen is, because she has plans of going all the way to the h6 square, and she will be backed up by a knight on f3, and then the knight sitting on g5 and a queen on h6.
Oh, whoops.
That's...
My arrows, sorry.
OK.
OK, so the queen and knight teaming up, they would go for the Black King, and actually the Black King is almost defenseless, has no pieces around it, and this would be super scary. But instead, Artemiev, he hasn't given Magnus enough time to do this. He's pushed a pawn forward, hitting this white knight, and the white knight has stepped back. So actually, Magnus, he's pretty much saying to Artemiev, let's just trade some pawns, let's get these guys off the board. Once your queen moves, I'm going to go on the attack. I'm going to go for the Black King. The queen is going to slide in, the two knights as well, together, just lurking nearby. And, OK, no, he hasn't done this. He's gone for a different angle, a different direction. He's brought his queen this way, trying to use his queen and rook on this line, try to go for the Black Queen. And actually, Jovanka, is this scary if Black's rook comes across? For the white knight to jump in, to deliver a check, and this king, look at this diagonal. It's completely cut off. It cannot utilise this diagonal. A scary attack incoming for Artemiev to deal with.
OK, we're going to see it on the board, David, because the rook has... OK, and...
Wow, just trading.
Didn't expect that, I'll be honest. So he just traded the rooks, handed Black control over the B line, and just stepped forward with the queen. And I've noticed that the moves are coming very, very quickly from Magnus. It's like, yes, which is a little bit reckless.
Yeah.
Because he has the time to take a pause and consider what's his best move.
He still has this plan to kind of go towards the Black King, but he's given Black time to deal with it, as you mentioned, and also giving Black access to this open line, trading off one of White's most active pieces. Some slightly negative decisions. It feels like Magnus is happy with the draw, happy to play for the draw at least. And if that continues, yes, he might get it in the end, but he might live to regret not actually playing for the win, not going on the attack.
We've seen a trade of knights, though, David.
We've seen a trade of knights. Yeah, Magnus just trying to be cynical here and just hoover up all the pieces.
Right now, though, who does this look best for?
I would still pick White, maybe, but I liked White's position a few moves ago better than I like it now.
I see.
OK, White's rook. OK, finding an open line, so both rooks now pretty happy where they stand. How about you, Jovanka? Whose position do you prefer?
Okay. Now I love White's position because the queen has found herself onto the dream attacking square. She's on the square, that's f6, and some big threats are incoming. We have a knight that's threatening to go to g4, and then along with that, the knight will go on. OK, that is why Artemiev has traded off queens, but just compare the placings of the rooks. I mean, White's rook is on an open file, Black's rook stuck looking at pawns in a completely defensive role, and Magnus has the complete upper hand here.
Yeah, I think with best play, this should be a draw, but White is having the fun for now. And more importantly, in a situation where a draw is fine, there's not that much risk anymore now that the queens have parted. And also, how is Black ever going to win? Because no matter what Black pawn pushes forward, you can't create a passed pawn. You can't sneak past White's army. Any Black pawn pushes will just be met with trades. And the more pawns that come off, the closer we are to that draw. OK, here we go. Artemiev pushing forward. Magnus is saying, yes, you're trying to push those pawns. You're trying to create some action. I'm just going to neutralise you. And, yeah, it's like a maths equation, just simplifying down to that magical 0 mark where both sides have no pawns remaining, no pieces remaining. I think Black's completely fine.
The move that the move that I think Magnus will play if he just wants to simplify is just simply push his d pawn up one square and then just undermine the protection of the knight. And there you go, another set of trades.
Yeah, that looks like a dead draw, Jovanka, and he does it. He plays your move. Just, if black captures that pawn, which he most likely will, then the black knight drops off. The white knight might drop off as well, but yeah, everything's just disappearing. And if the knights come off, a pure rook endgame when there's no imbalances, no passed pawns, no extra pawns for either side is just easy draw. And the knights being on the board, that was the only real danger to white. So he's eliminated that danger.
Yeah, Magnus playing in a very mechanical, efficient way.
Yeah, and now it's 4 pawns against 4 pawns. White is slightly on the back foot because white has 2 isolated pawns, but it's not enough in these rook endgames.
Yeah, and Magnus can even trade off, well, actually lose one of his weak pawns. It doesn't really matter. All that matters is that if he has a 3 versus 2 position on the right side, it's enough to draw. He can do it almost with his eyes closed.
Yeah, so even if Magnus were to lose one of those pawns, as you mentioned, his isolated pawn in the centre, still a draw, but he wants to keep them intact. 3 versus 3 is very simple, and even against an endgame expert like Artemiev, no way to imbalance things here. This one will be drawn any moment. Artemiev, I doubt he'll play around with this one because no resources, no attacking resources. OK, he pushes 1 pawn forward. Magnus will likely block that pawn. Yep, there we go. Just completely blocked now. And note how Magnus has placed his rook on the 7th rank, keeping the black king tied down to its own pawns. The black king wants to come into the position, but no chance of that happening.
All right, any second now, you say? This will be a draw, basically.
Over the next minute or so, probably.
Artemiev just going through those emotions. That will be a loss for him in the match.
You can see in his body language there, just frustrated. He knows that he didn't really get any chances in this game. There were 1 or 2 moments where Magnus looked like he was getting excited, but any time that action was about to start, fireworks were about to occur, Magnus changed his mind and said, no, let's just go for trades instead. Sometimes that approach is just the way forward when you need a draw. And, OK, now I expect Magnus's rook to drop back and cut off the black king, stop that black king from... OK, he goes after the black pawns instead. OK,
now the black king can step forward. That gives some hope.
No way to... If the black king goes over to protect his pawns, white will give a check with his pawn and deflect the black king away. I think white is about to win the pawn that he's attacking. Here we go. White's going to give a check. Deflect away that king.
Kill the game.
The pawns are disappearing, Jovanka. Chances are disappearing for Artemiev.
Yeah, OK, and Artemiev steps back with his king. Rook moves over and...
Magnus is literally hoovering them all up. That rook attacking a pawn.
It would be Magnus, actually, who wins the pawn.
Yeah, unless the black king comes closer.
It's there, and after rook takes pawn.
Zero chances.
King takes pawn.
Yeah.
But...
2 for 1 up now for Magnus, but...
Yeah.
Yeah, no winning chances for either side. White has a really bad king, but a passive king is not enough for black to push anything, to try anything. OK, matter of time, matter of moments, and Artemiev laughing, smiling there. He knows it's about to be a draw on the board. Will he offer that draw himself?
Yes.
No, he just eliminates everything, and it's king versus king. That's very drawn.
All right, that means Vladislav Artemiev, he loses the first match in the final. Magnus Carlsen is the winner, up by 1 point, 1 whole point in the big final. So Artemiev, he has to make a comeback tomorrow to take it to tie breaks. Magnus Carlsen, he has played. I mean, there was one moment in game 3. We're going to ask him if that was a mouse slip or just a moment of madness. But other than that, Jovanka, how would you rate the world champion's performance on day 1?
Smooth. Yeah. Totally in control. And he seemed to really have gauged Artemiev's style, and he knew exactly what to do to put Artemiev under pressure. And barring that slip in game 3, Artemiev really looked a little bit lost. But there is a moment of hope for Artemiev. You know, in game 2, when he managed to complicate the position and he took it to the wild extremes, Magnus looked slightly shaky.
Yeah, because we have to remember there's been internet connection problems, maybe also some nerves for Artemiev. You know, he said in the interview yesterday, this is a big occasion for him to play Magnus.
Yeah, definitely. This is probably one of the biggest days of his life, and the same for tomorrow. And we've seen him in the tour before. When he got to a final against Aronian, he'd been great up to that point. Then he suddenly slowed down, and suddenly he lost a few games in a row, and he just didn't seem himself. And that seemed the case today, especially at the beginning, especially that first game. Artemiev just didn't seem in the flow. And if he can conquer those nerves, if he can come back tomorrow with that kind of nothing to lose attitude, then he's got a chance.
Yeah. If he, internet is smooth, and now he's done with this first day. So maybe nerves won't be as big. He has to make he has to win the match tomorrow to take it to tie breaks. Do you expect big things from Artemiev tomorrow?
Yeah, he has to remember he's done it before. He did it against Ding Liren in the, I can't remember, one of the previous tournaments. But, so he's done it before, so he's capable of doing it, and he just has to kind of just not treat Magnus with the utmost of respect.
All right, well, we are joined by Magnus Carlsen, winner of day one. A smooth performance here, said by Ivanka. Congratulations, Magnus. How do you feel?
Yeah, a little bit so-so. Obviously, there were a couple of things that I could have done a lot better. But yeah, overall, I guess reasonably comfortable.
So maybe we can start talking about that queen move then in game 3. What happened there? Was it a mouse slip or what happened?
Well, my first idea was to play queen from e4 to e6. So I almost played it, and then I became a bit unsure, and I thought I put the queen back, and I kept thinking. And I think I sat there for like a minute before I realized that I'd actually put the queen on the wrong square, because I thought the queen was back, and I was thinking, and then I noticed all of a sudden that it was his move, and I was shocked by that, obviously. Because the thing is, queen e6 isn't even a very good move, and I sort of realized that eventually that I should probably play something else. But that was unfortunate. Since without that move, I don't think the fourth game happens.
Yeah, we could see a big reactions for you when you realized this wasn't the best move then, Magnus. So after sort of a very good day so far then, how irritating was that?
Well, already the second game was kind of poor. I completely miscalculated early on, and I was frankly just hoping to survive before he blundered. But yeah, I guess he had some troubles with his connection and everything, and he usually gets down on time anyway. But yeah, I don't know. I think we both have some things to improve for tomorrow.
All right, but also let's talk a little bit about that game 1 then. It looked like an absolutely amazing game by you. Do you agree with that?
No, not at all, actually. I think I played well up to a certain point, but then I made a huge mistake when I played queen to g5 at some point, giving him time to push his pawn and gain a few tempi there. I thought my position was so good that I could do anything, and I kind of wanted to provoke f4, but if I just play some different move, he just has no ideas at all. He's just unbelievably passive whenever he pushes his pawn to kick away my knight. His position is weakened, so I can just, and his rooks are really, really passive as well, so I can just do anything. While in the game, I gave him serious counter chances, and I sort of decided to gamble there and sacrifice another pawn. But I assumed with the strength of my pieces, I should never be worse. But still, it was quite unnecessary.
Mm-hmm. And Magnus, we saw that you were in good spirits throughout the match. Was this part of your strategy, just to be happy and calm?
Yeah, but I guess it backfired in the sense that I was too calm and I muscled. But I guess it helped in the fourth game that I just tried to play quickly and not overthink too much.
I tried before, but I'll try again. Can you reveal what made you laugh?
No, I don't even remember. No.
All right. Well, I guess it's tomorrow about having good spirits again, Magnus. What other things did you learn from match 1 here that you will bring to tomorrow, to match 2?
Well, I think this kind of reaffirmed that Artemiev can be quite vulnerable in dynamic and tactical play. So I think that's the main area where I can strike.
All right. Magnus, we wish you best of luck on the final day of Aimchess US Rapid. Thanks for joining us.
Thank you.
All right. Magnus Carlsen, winner of day 1, an eventful and entertaining first day in the final. And we're joined by Vladislav Artemiev. So, first of all, how are you feeling after losing day 1 then, Vladislav?
Good evening. I think that first game was normal. Magnus played as well. But still, I can to improve my game in this because, for example, instead f5, maybe g5 is better, and probably it's unclear position. But okay, it's only first game. I can to say that after this I have problems with my connection in second game, and of course it was not easy. Position was very complicated and difficult for mines, and I have big problems also with connection.
Yeah. How stressful? How stressful was those minutes when you were just disconnected?
Yes, I was very disappointed in this moment because I lost one game, and I start to understand that if I lose again, it will be crazy for me. But finally, I lost again. So, okay, it happens. But I think that in the next game where I won, I was lucky because I not understand move queen e5. Maybe it's a mouse slip because queen e6 is logical and white only slightly better, I think.
Yeah, and a great comeback by you then there. But have you felt nervous throughout the day? You said to us yesterday that it was a big event for you to play the final against Magnus here.
Of course, first I'm happy, but still because I have problems with my internet connection, it's not good for me, and I will try improve it also, not only my chess. And of course, I very waiting second match, and why no? It's very interesting for me. Good experience play against Magnus.
And there, Vladislav, you mentioned doing something different. How's your routine going to change, or how's your approach going to change tomorrow on the board?
Maybe I will change my opening style, maybe, or some different things. But still, maybe I must to play more quickly because I have problems with time also, time management.
Do you have a team, maybe a trainer or some seconds that is helping you during this tournament with opening preparations?
On this tournament, I not have a personal trainer, but I have some friends who can help me a little bit, and I can ask something. So I'm fully is fine. Yeah.
Fantastic. Well, we wish you the best on the second day tomorrow, Vladislav, and looking forward to some more entertainment from you. Thanks for joining us.
Thanks a lot. Yes, see you.
See you tomorrow. Yes, all the best to you too. Artemiev has to make a comeback tomorrow. And, well, if anyone can do it, I bet it's Vladislav Artemiev. What a great player. And technology has been a big theme today. And it's time to announce the winner for the question of today.
Yeah, so we were asking what new technology would help chess, and there was an amazing prize up for grabs. And the lucky winner is Shathan Badar, who says a new app. With it, you can listen to the pieces talk back to you and give you their feelings on the board during the game. Chess/drama.
I love it.
I love it too. I absolutely hope that someone develops that app.
Yeah.
And congratulations, Shathan. You are the lucky winner of a Chessable course, 1 year Play Magnus Plus membership, and 1 year Chess24 Premium membership. Congratulations.
Yeah, I think, I mean, this would be an app for beginners like myself. Would you also sometimes use it though, David? Go and talk to the pieces.
Definitely for fun, for entertainment, and during the games, I genuinely do this. I talk to my pieces just to ask which one needs to be improved first, and I wish they talk back to me.
Yeah, I can just see it as well, this app with celebrity voices.
Yeah,
maybe some of them are a little bit posh, some of them a bit thuggish. Perfect. It needs to be creative.
Yeah, what a great idea. Yeah. What a great idea. Thank you for that answer and congratulations. And let's take a look also at the results from the first day of the final in the Aimchess US Rapid. Magnus Carlsen, he won the first game in very nice fashion. The second one, a dramatic one with some connection issues for Artemiev and a blunder. Magnus Carlsen won that one too, but in the third one, Artemiev, after an incorrect move by Magnus, he was able to win that one to make that comeback, but a draw in the final game means Magnus Carlsen is the winner of the first match in the final. He will only need to tie the match tomorrow to be the winner of the Aimchess US Rapid. If Artemiev makes a comeback, then we will head into tie breaks. All right, what a dramatic start to the final, you guys. Probably some more of that tomorrow. In the meantime, have a good one.